Chapter 159. Upon hearing his words, Chao Xian and Chao Duo nodded in agreement. Clearly, they had the same thoughts. Charge over. Have you forgotten how you fell off your horse? Chao Jixiang glared at Chao Xian. He had just patted off the dust on his body, yet he had already forgotten about the pain. Did he even have a brain? Chao Xian was naturally indignant after being reprimanded. However, when he thought about how he fell off his horse for no reason, he immediately suppressed the impulse in his heart. He couldn't help but look to the sides of the road. However, there was only dense forest everywhere, and he couldn't see anything out of the ordinary. Time slowly passed. Finally, the sound of horse hooves could be heard. Yang Si arrived on horseback. Chao Jixiang heaved a sigh of relief. However, when he saw that only Yang Si had arrived and that Yang Qindong wasn't with him, he couldn't help but raise his eyebrows. What is the meaning of this? Does he not want to meet me? At this moment, Yang Si arrived before the two armies and stopped in front of Tang Tong and the others. After which, Yang Si announced loudly, "The Count has ordered for eunuch Chao to bring 2 attendants and follow me into the manor for a chat." What? Upon hearing that only 2 people were allowed in, Chao Xian and the others immediately flew into a frenzy. The 2 foster sons, Chao Xian and Chao Duo, even tried to dissuade him. This was a trap, and they hoped that their foster father wouldn't fall for it. At this moment, Chao Jixiang was also furious. This Yang Qindong didn't take him seriously at all. He clearly knew his identity, yet he didn't come out to greet him personally. Instead, he allowed him to bring only 2 attendants into the manor. This was clearly a slap to his face. Of course, Chao Jixiang didn't think that Yang Qindong was trying to harm him. Firstly, there wasn't any conflict of interest between them. Secondly, if Wang Chong really wanted to harm him, all he had to do was use the same method he used on Chao Xian, and he wouldn't be able to avoid it. Being looked down on like this, Chao Jixiang really wanted to turn around and leave in anger. However, if he were to leave, he would really become a barren tree. Putting aside the fact that he wouldn't be able to return to the capital, he wouldn't be able to meet Ingzong either. At that time, he would definitely be labeled as a rebel. Sigh. Forget it. When one is under someone else's roof, one has no choice but to lower one's head. However, Yang Qindong, for humiliating me like this today, this duke will get his revenge sooner or later. Chao Jixiang decided to lower his head. He turned around and pointed to 2 good fighters from the East faction and said, "You 2 come with me. The rest of you stay here. Remember, no matter what happens, no matter how long you wait, stay here obediently. If anyone dares to make a decision on their own, I will not let them off easily when I return." His gaze lingered on the trio for a while before Chao Jixiang tidied up his attire and rode over to Yang Si with his 2 servants. "Brother, please lead the way." No problem, no problem. Please." Seeing that Tang Tong was being polite, Yang Si naturally returned the greeting. Then, the 4 of them walked past Tang Tong and the others, heading straight to the Yang clan manor. Not long after Chao Jixiang left, another team arrived behind his team. The leaders were Jining, Han Ji, and the others. Jining seemed to cherish her life. She had brought 3,000 men with her this time. Although both sides were embroidered uniform guards, in reality, they belonged to 2 different camps. The moment they met, an atmosphere of mutual hostility filled the air. "Do not attack without orders. I am here to pay my respects to Count Zhongdan. Please make way." Jining walked at the front. On her left and right were the martial arts experts from the East faction. This was to ensure that if anyone tried to harm her, she could react immediately. Since Jining did not take the initiative to attack, Chao Jixiang and the others naturally would not look for trouble. Everyone was wary of each other and allowed them to come before the 2 armies. With Yang Si gone, Tang Tong became the person in charge and was pushed forward. The moment he stepped forward, his aura was greatly reduced in front of Jining. He actually cupped his fists and bowed, saying, Greetings, eunuch Jean. Oh, I remember you. You are Tang Tong, Qianhu of the embroidered uniform guards, right? Ha, how about this? I will have to trouble you to inform him that I have something important to discuss with Count Zhongdan. Jean Ying's face was full of smiles, as if she and Tang Tong were old acquaintances. This was the first time Jean Ying respected him so much. For a moment, Tang Tong felt like he was floating. All right. Please wait for a moment, eunuch Jean. I will go to Yang village now. Thank you, thank you. As Jean Ying finished speaking, Tang Tong had already mounted his horse. He turned and galloped in the direction of Yang village. Yang Si brought Chao Jixiang and the others to the inner courtyard of Yang village. Yang Lu stood there. He raised his hand and blocked their way. What are you doing? Yang Lu's action caused one of the embroidered uniform guards to draw his spring-embroidered knife. But just as he drew his steel knife, he felt pain in his arm. Blood splattered. His right hand holding the knife had been hit by the first guard hidden on the roof of Yang village. The steel knife fell to the ground. The guard's pained cry rang out. You have 3 breaths time to shut up. Otherwise, the next hit won't be your arm, but your head. Yang Lu reached out his right hand and gestured a pistol. He chuckled as he spoke to the embroidered uniform guard who dared to draw his knife. Although Yang Lu was smiling when he spoke, the content of his words was so terrifying that the embroidered uniform guard immediately shut his mouth. He allowed the pain to break out in a cold sweat. He didn't dare to make the slightest sound. That's more like it. Our count doesn't like to see people using weapons. So, it's best that you cooperate with the inspection. Come, raise your arms and take out your weapons. Yang Lu walked in front of Chao Jixiang with a twisted smile. Chao Jixiang knew that Yang Lu wanted to search him. Although he didn't have any weapons on him, this action was a form of contempt. This made him very unhappy. But since he was here, he had to abide by the rules. Especially since there was already an example in front of him, he didn't dare to play any tricks. Only after letting out an unhappy snort, he still cooperated with Yang Lu's inspection in the end. After searching for a while and not finding any dangerous items on him, Yang Lu nodded and spoke to Yang Si. 4th brother, I'll bring him in. No problem. I also need to keep an eye on the front in case anyone tries to play any tricks. As for these 2, just stay here obediently. Remember, if you dare to do anything untoward, I guarantee that your heads will explode in the next second. After Yang Si agreed, he intimidated the 2 embroidered uniform guards who had followed him. Then, he mounted his horse and rushed out of the manor. Just as Yang Si rode out of the manor, he saw Tang Tong riding a horse towards him. Stop! Why aren't you keeping an eye on the front? Why are you running into the manor? Tang Tong was still a Qianhu of the embroidered uniform guards and wasn't considered a member of the Yang Xie's new army. Naturally, he couldn't enter the manor as he pleased. Brother Yang Si, eunuch Jean Ying is here. He's just 5 li away and says he wants to see the count. When Tang Tong saw Yang Si, he didn't know why he felt nervous. Perhaps he was worried that if he didn't perform well, something would fly out of nowhere and kill him. So what if he's here? What's there to be surprised about? Wait here first. I'll report this matter to the count. Yang Si, who was very dissatisfied with Tang Tong's performance, rolled his eyes and pointed to the ground. He meant to tell Tang Tong that he could go up to this point. If he wanted to go any further, he would be crossing the line. Tang Tong was an understanding person. He nodded repeatedly and almost raised his hand to swear that he wouldn't cross the line. Not far from the 2 of them, outside the Yang Manor, 900 embroidered uniform guards were eating with pots and pots. Since they had come to the Yang Manor, there was naturally plenty of good food and drink. They were really eating big pieces of meat and drinking big mouthfuls of wine. Even from a distance, a fragrant smell wafted over. This was the rule of the Yang Manor. As long as you weren't a member of the Yang Manor, no matter what your status was, you couldn't stay here without permission. This rule came into effect after Yang Qindong returned. In the side hall of the Yang family manor, Chao Jixiang saw Yang Qindong, who was dressed in green. Just like before the battle, he was wearing the most ordinary green clothes. When Yang Qindong walked out under the protection of Tiger's mane, Chao Jixiang hurriedly stood up and said respectfully with a smile, "Greetings, Count Zhongdan. Eunuch Chao is too polite. Take a seat." Casually pointing to a chair, Yang Qindong sat down at the head of the table with a smile on his face. When Yang Qindong sat down, Chao Jixiang slowly sat down, giving off a feeling that he was following the rules. But the more he acted like this, the more Yang Qindong felt that this person wasn't simple, and the more cautious he became. After both parties sat down, Yang Qindong took the initiative to speak. "I believe Eunuch Chao is here to ask about Ingzong's whereabouts. This count can tell you that the emperor is fine. He eats well and sleeps well. He is on his way to the capital. It's just that." Hearing that Ingzong was fine, Chao Jixiang's face revealed a happy smile. Dai Zong had already put Jining in an important position, so it was impossible for him to put him in an important position. But with Ingzong, if Wang Jin died, he would have a chance to be promoted. But after hearing Yang Qindong's words, his originally smiling face became tense. But what does Count Zhongdan mean by just that? Sigh. With a long sigh, Yang Qindong pretended to bemoan the state of the universe and the fate of mankind, and said, "But now that there is an emperor in the capital, I really don't know what will happen to Ingzong when he returns." Yes. After hearing this, Chao Jixiang's face became much more unsightly. Now that there was a new substitute emperor, Zhu Qiyu, in the capital, why would Zhu Qizhen return at this time? It was impossible for there to be two emperors in a single dynasty. One of them was destined to leave the throne. Although Ingzong had been the emperor for a long time, Dai Zong now occupied the capital, controlled the army, and had the initiative. If they really fought, it was unknown who would win. Chapter 160. If Ingzong won, everything would be fine. But if he lost, wouldn't he be doomed as well? The stakes were too high. Human lives were at stake. Seeing Chao Jixiang nod his head in agreement, Yang Qindong asked, "Eunuch Chao, you are very familiar with the situation in the capital and the imperial court. Do you have any good ideas?" "Ah. You really don't have any? As the saying goes, two tigers cannot live on one mountain. If the two tigers fight, one of them will be injured." Chao Jixiang gave an example, saying that they needed a war to solve the problem. No. After hearing Chao Jixiang's suggestion, Yang Qindong shook his head. "Eunuch Chao, since you have been in the capital for a long time and hold the power of the Eastern Depot and the embroidered uniform guard, you should know that Walla's army is approaching the capital. If there is an internal conflict in the imperial court at this time, it will only hurt those close to you and make your enemies happy. Then what should we do?" Thinking about the military intelligence he had just received, Walla's army had already broken through Baiyang Pass and Zijing Pass, and was currently attacking Jiong Pass. The gates to the capital were about to open, and if that was the case, the capital would be in danger. It was indeed not a good time to have internal strife. But in this situation, without confirming who the emperor was, how could they divide their forces to fight against Walla's army? Just as Chao Jixiang's face was filled with worry, Yang Si rushed in from outside. The moment he entered the hall, he knelt on the ground and respectfully said to Yang Qindong, "Young master, Eunuch Jining is here. He is waiting for you 5 li outside the Yang residence." "Oh. So fast." Please." After hearing this, Yang Qindong was not surprised at all. It was clear that he had expected this. But after saying, "please," he did not forget to add to Yang Si, "Old rules, he can only bring 2 people to the residence. Sigh, this uncle only wants to live the life of an ordinary person. I don't want to see an army coming. I will be afraid." "Yes." Yang Si nodded and then walked out of the room. When Chao Jixiang saw this, his heart was filled with disdain. You have such powerful retainers, are you afraid that others will send an army to attack you? What a joke. Of course, these were just thoughts in his heart. After knowing that Jining was coming, there were some things that needed to be said in advance. Originally, Chao Jixiang wanted to wait for the right time, but now, he didn't dare to hide anything. Uncle Zhongdan, Jining has already pledged her loyalty to Dai Zong. You have saved Ing Zong, and you have done a great service. I believe that once Ing Zong ascends to the position, you will not be lacking in benefits. You have to think twice about your every move. Reconsider. Well, I've been thinking about it. Let me think about it. Yang Qindong kept nodding, as if he had heard Chao Jixiang's words. However, from that moment on, he actually stopped talking. Instead, he closed his eyes, giving off the feeling that he was thinking about something. However, he was actually waiting for Jin Ying's arrival. Only when she was here could the next step be carried out as he wished. Seeing that Yang Qindong was indeed reconsidering, Chao Jixiang suddenly became anxious. Uncle Zhongdan, no matter what, Ing Zong has been in power for more than 10 years. He is still very popular in the imperial court. Compared to Dai Zong, who has just ascended to the position, he has too many advantages. He should be the one to take charge. That's right, that's right. Eunuch Chao is right. Let me think about it carefully. Yang Qindong still didn't open his eyes. He kept nodding, giving off the feeling that he was really thinking hard. 5 miles away from the Yang Manor, Yang Si and Tang Tong rushed back. When it was said that Jining was allowed to enter the manor, but she could only bring 2 guards, eunuch Jin didn't even show a trace of displeasure. Instead, he happily nodded and agreed. Then, he smiled and rode his horse to Yang Si's side. From this, it could be seen that Jining and Chao Jixiang were both astute people. Oftentimes, the more polite a person appeared on the surface, the harder it was to deal with them. Not long after, Jining appeared at the Yang Manor. When she entered the side hall, she saw Yang Qindong resting with his eyes closed. Chao Jixiang had an anxious expression on his face. Listening to the voice and looking at people's faces, Jin Ying's heart calmed down just from this discovery. If Yang Qindong had already made a decision, Chao Jixiang wouldn't be so anxious. Since that was the case, it meant that he still had a chance. It had to be said that Jining had indeed served 4 emperors. No. Now, it should be 5 emperors. Few people could compare to her decisiveness in doing things. Seeing that the situation was still uncertain, she reached into her clothes and took out an imperial edict with a golden dragon on it. At the same time, she shouted, "The imperial edict has arrived. Uncle Zhongdan, please accept it." I, Yang Qindong, accept the imperial edict. When he heard that it was an imperial edict, an undetectable joy flashed across Yang Qindong's eyes. He knew that Dai Zong was going to give him some benefits. He just didn't know what kind of conditions Dai Zong would give him. Yang Qindong knelt on the ground. Jining read aloud, "By the will of the heavens, the emperor decrees that Count Zhongdan Yang Qindong is young and promising. He is proficient in both martial arts and literature. He protected the retired emperor on the dangerous battlefield. His loyalty to the great Ming dynasty is witnessed by the heavens and earth. He is hereby conferred the title of Duke Zhongdan and the position of commander of the Brocade Guards." Emperor Zong of the Ming dynasty proclaims this. After Jining finished reading the imperial edict, she smiled and said to Yang Qindong, who was kneeling on the ground, "Marquis, please rise." The count had become the Marquis. Yang Qindong's lips curled into a faint smile. "Thank you, eunuch Jin. You've worked hard. You're too kind." Compared to Marquis bravely saving the retired emperor, what I did pales in comparison. Jin Ying's eyes narrowed into slits. This was the second time he had mentioned the title of retired emperor. As soon as he finished speaking, Chao Jixiang shouted in protest, "Eunuch Jin, what are you doing? How did Emperor Ingzong become retired emperor?" How come I didn't know about this? How dare you? This is an imperial edict from Emperor Daizong. Did he need to discuss it with you first? Jining was not so amiable when facing Chao Jixiang. Whether it was in terms of seniority or power, the two of them were not on the same page. In the face of Jin Ying's rebuke, Chao Jixiang had no intention of backing down. In truth, from the moment he had led his warriors and the embroidered uniform guard out of the capital, he had already decided on his stance. Since he had already made his choice, why would he be afraid of Jin Ying's angry rebuke? Chao Jixiang sneered. When Emperor Daizong took the throne, it was because Shiheng reported that Emperor Yingzong was no longer around. But now that Emperor Yingzong is fine and will soon return to the capital, Emperor Daizong should take the initiative to abdicate. After all, his regent power was bestowed upon him by Emperor Yingzong. Oh. Emperor Yingzong is returning to the capital. Jining blinked several times at this news. She ignored Chao Jixiang and turned to Yang Qindong, who was receiving an imperial edict, and asked, Marquis? Is this true? It's true. Yang Qindong had accepted benefits from Emperor Daizong, so he naturally had to express his gratitude. He immediately said, Eunuch Chao is correct. Emperor Yingzong is heading to the capital with Minister of War Kuang Yi, Minister of Revenue Wang Zhua, and other officials. Marquis was ordered by Emperor Yingzong to return to the capital first so that he could report to everyone that he was safe. But he didn't expect Emperor Daizong to have already ascended the throne. In this case, once Emperor Yingzong returns to the capital, won't there be a country with two emperors? What should we do then? Yang Qindong directly laid out the problem in front of Jining and Chao Jixiang. His gaze continued to wander between the two of them. A country with two emperors. Whenever such a thing appeared in history, it would always be accompanied by fierce battles. How could a mountain contain two tigers? Not to mention, how could there be two voices in a country? If something were to happen, whose orders should they listen to? Jining and Chao Jixiang quickly thought of this problem, and for a moment, their faces turned extremely nasty. They felt like they had been stumped by reality. Based on the current situation, it was clear that no one would back down so easily. The result was likely to be a clash of swords and weapons. With a great enemy like Walla by their side, any internal strife would only benefit others. In the side chamber, the atmosphere became extremely tense. The three of them didn't speak for a long time, each with their heads lowered, thinking about their own matters. Yang Qindong also had his head lowered, but he wasn't thinking about anything. Instead, he was resting with his eyes closed. He had hurried on his journey and hadn't had a good rest since returning. He was indeed a little sleepy. It was precisely because he was sleepy that he began to snore softly. This was so clear in the silent side chamber, so out of place. Cough, cough, Jining and Chao Jixiang coughed softly at the same time, using this method to wake Yang Qindong up. There was movement. Yang Qindong had indeed woken up. When he raised his head, he met Jining and Chao Jixiang's eyes. He smiled and said, What? Have the two of you come to a conclusion? If you have, then please leave. Marquis has been hurrying on the road for days. He is indeed too tired. After he finished speaking, Yang Qindong slowly stood up. From the looks of it, it was clear that he wanted to leave this place and find a big bed to have a good sleep. Yang Qindong wanted to leave. This made Jining and Chao Jixiang very anxious. They both knew that they couldn't make a decision on their own. If the other party was unwilling to give in, they wouldn't give in either. In the end, they would only meet in battle. This was an outcome that neither of them wanted to see, because no one could guarantee that they would be the victor. After thinking about it, he still needed Yang Qindong to be a partner, or a middleman, to give a balanced and reasonable way to deal with it. Since that was the case, how could they let him leave? At that moment, the two of them blocked Yang Qindong's path. Marquis, we can't come to a conclusion. Can you please show us the way? Chapter 161. You want me to lead the way? You trust Marquis that much? Yang Qindong was already familiar with his current identity. He spoke without missing the word ho. Jining and Chao Jixiang were not displeased at all. On the contrary, they both nodded solemnly with serious expressions. Ai, if that's the case, then Marquis will say a few words. As he spoke, Yang Qindong returned to his seat at the head of the table. All right. Let's ask Marquis to say a few words. No matter what your decision is, Emperor Daizong will seriously consider it and thank you. Jining quickly expressed her determination. At the same time, she brought up Daizong's identity. Chao Jixiang naturally did not want to fall behind. He immediately said, "That's right. Marquis, please give us an idea. Emperor Yingzong was saved by you. I'm sure His Majesty will agree and be grateful for your decision." The two of them were equally matched. They both brought up the emperor behind them, reminding Yang Qindong that he had to treat them equally. Yang Qindong only smiled at the little tricks used by the two of them and did not expose them. He returned to his seat and took a sip of tea to moisten his throat. Then, he slowly said, "Emperor Daizong's intention is to make Emperor Yingzong the retired emperor, right?" "That's right." Jining nodded in response. "I'm sure Emperor Yingzong will not accept this. He's only in his early 20s. I'm sure no one would be willing to become the retired emperor." When Yang Qindong said this, he looked at Chao Jixiang and asked. "That's right. Yingzong was at the peak of the spring and autumn period. He could do a lot of things. How could he become the retired emperor?" Chao Jixiang also couldn't help but nod, praising Yang Qindong's words. "All right, I understand what you mean. Obviously, this title of retired emperor is not suitable. If we must do it this way, it is very likely that we will meet on the battlefield. When that time comes, the only thing that will be lost will be the vitality of my great Ming dynasty, and the ones who will die will be the warriors of the great Ming dynasty. But don't forget that Walla's army is on its way to the capital. Once it breaks through Jiong Pass, the gates to the capital will be wide open. At this time, we can't afford to be unstable. Otherwise, we'll be hurting our friends and rejoicing our enemies, right?" That's right. Jining and Chao Jixiang both nodded in agreement with Yang Qindong's analysis of the situation. "Yes. Since we can't fight, then we can only negotiate. How about this? The acting great emperor doesn't need to talk about the retired great emperor. This will definitely not work." Yang Qindong was very satisfied with the cooperation of the two. This saved him a lot of effort. "That's right. Marquis is wise." Chao Jixiang could tell from these words that Yang Qindong was siding with Zhu Qizhen, so he hastily agreed. This made Jining, who was at the side, a little unhappy. "What's wrong? We just promoted you to Valiant Marquis, and you're not even speaking for the acting great emperor?" But before Jining could object, Yang Qindong turned to her and said, "The acting great emperor can't possibly abdicate the throne to Emperor Yingzong, who lost to the enemy on the battlefield, right?" When Yang Qindong said that Emperor Yingzong was a defeated emperor, Jining was extremely happy, and she immediately agreed. Yes, it's only Marquis who has sharp eyes that can see through everything." Ha! Yang Qindong only chuckled at this not-so-clever flattery, not minding it at all. Instead, he continued, "Then this matter is already extremely clear. Everyone has their own reasons, and both of you are emperors of the 9 and 5. Relying on the capital alone won't be enough to satisfy your needs. Why not shift your gaze elsewhere? Why must you stick to one place? The Great Ming doesn't just have one major city, the capital." "Ah! What is Marquis' intention?" When Jining and Chao Jixiang heard this, they were stunned. They did not understand what Yang Qindong meant. "Ha, this isn't Marquis' intention. The two of you asked me for advice, so I had no choice but to come up with this idea. Of course, this idea might not be very clever, but if eunuchs don't think it's appropriate, you can just pretend that Marquis didn't say anything." Yang Qindong chuckled, putting on a nonchalant expression. In fact, this result was within his expectations. In fact, he had already made preparations for this when Ingzong set out for the war. Yang Qindong had come up with the idea, but he didn't want to take the blame. Jining and Chao Jixiang were both shrewd people, so how could they not understand the meaning behind these words? The two of them immediately nodded. Yes, we asked Marquis for the idea. None of this matter has anything to do with eunuch. Very good. Since that's the case, I'll add a few words. Since the capital can only have one emperor, why can't Emperor Ingzong give up this place? For example, if you go to the capital of Nanjing, the climate there is pleasant, and it's no less prosperous than the capital. It already has other palaces and palaces. It truly is a place where dragons flourish. Under their gazes, Yang Qindong finally revealed the ultimate goal of his plan, which was to divide the great Ming dynasty into two. Go to Nanjing. Chao Jixiang's eyes widened. It seemed that this result was completely out of his expectations. It was also something that he had never thought of before. It wasn't just Chao Jixiang. Even Jining fell silent. Similarly, the result was somewhat out of his expectations. He had originally believed that as long as he could rope in Yang Qindong, he would be able to learn of Emperor Ingzong's whereabouts. Afterward, he would send an army to bring Emperor Emeritus back to the capital and place him under house arrest. But now, it seemed that Yang Qindong would not betray Emperor Ingzong. Not only that, he even had the idea of allowing Emperor Ingzong to continue as emperor. Fortunately, he was not allowed to return to the capital, which could be considered as speaking on Dai Zong's behalf. Yang Qindong had proposed the plan, but whether or not they would do it was not up to him to decide. However, he believed that his idea would be the most perfect one after considering all the situations. Chao Jixiang fell silent as he mentally weighed the feasibility of this plan. Dai Zong was now emperor in the capital and wielded great power. If Emperor Ingzong returned, there was a high chance that he would be captured and then placed under house arrest with the title of Emperor Emeritus until he died. If this was the case, anyone who had pledged allegiance to Emperor Ingzong could easily imagine their fate. Since he had no confidence, he might as well go to Nanjing and proclaim himself emperor. Given that Emperor Ingzong had been emperor for so many years, he should be able to quickly accumulate a powerful force. At that time, he would have the choice of remaining in Nanjing or fighting his way back to the capital. In this way, Yang Qindong's plan could not be considered wrong. On the other end, Jining was also considering Yang Qindong's proposal. It was true that Dai Zong was emperor and that he controlled the capital. But his ascension to the throne had not been justified, and he had only been on the throne for such a short period of time. Who knew what those important officials in the capital were thinking? If they supported Emperor Ingzong, wouldn't Dai Zong's position be at risk? If that was the case, what sort of role would he be playing and where would he go? Speaking of which, even if Dai Zong won, he would probably be riddled with wounds, perhaps even greatly weakened. What strength would he have left to resist the Walla's army? And if he was ultimately defeated by the foreigners, he would not have a good end either. It was better to just let Emperor Ingzong proclaim himself emperor in Nanjing. As long as he developed well, there was no need to worry about the day when he could reunite the country. Dai Zong would have more time to prepare, and Jining would be able to obtain even more benefits. The two of them had different thoughts, but their final decision was the same. After some thought, Chao Jixiang made a temporary decision. Okay, I agree. This duke will do his best to persuade Emperor Ingzong, but there are still some conditions. For example, the families of Quang Yi and the other important officials are still in the capital and need you to let them go. In addition, if other officials are willing to go with Emperor Ingzong, you are not allowed to stop them. Everything is up to them. This was a temporary decision because Chao Jixiang could not represent Emperor Ingzong. He could only act as a lobbyist. Jining had also made her decision. She felt that Chao Jixiang's conditions were reasonable, but she stated that she would have to go back and consult Dai Zong Emperor Zhu Qiyu before she could give a final answer. In front of Yang Qindong, the two of them discussed a few general issues, but they did not discuss the details. This was because they were both keenly aware that anything that was too detailed would end in the end. Both sides would have to send representatives for more detailed discussions before they could reach a conclusion. This included the territories under the jurisdiction of the two emperors. Yang Qindong was only responsible for the two of them. As for whether they succeeded or not, and what else they had to do after they succeeded, he would not interfere. By doing all this, he already had suspicions that he had exceeded his authority. He did not want to interfere in every matter and end up being hated by others. Although Jining had not learned of Ingzong's whereabouts from Yang Qindong, she had managed to protect Dai Zong's position and return satisfied. She left Chao Jixiang alone in the side hall. He had to see Emperor Ingzong before he could do anything. Marquis will arrange for someone to lead you to Emperor Ingzong. You can do as you see fit. Oh right, when you leave, remember to bring Empress Qian with you. I think she will cooperate with you to do some things. Looking at Chao Jixiang, who was standing there with a longing expression, Yang Qindong left these words before he got up and left the side hall. Now that he had succeeded, he could finally have a good rest for a few days. Of course, some people might ask, why did Yang Qindong give up such a good opportunity to control the emperor and give it to Chao Jixiang when he already had actual control over Zhu Qizhen? This was where Yang Qindong was smart. Mingzong had ascended to the throne, and Ingzong was naturally weaker. In addition, Yang Qindong had played a balancing role in the middle. It could be seen that in the future, no matter who it was, it would be very difficult to have the great Ming dynasty alone. Since Ingzong was no longer the one and only emperor whose words carried enormous weight, why did Yang Qindong want to hold him in his hands and make him the target of public criticism? With an emperor by his side, he would have to ask for instructions from time to time, and he would even have to kneel. How could it compare to the pleasure and satisfaction of being an independent third party? Chapter 162. Chao Jixiang had some ability. Once he developed, he wouldn't be too far off from Wang Zhen. But it was precisely because he had the ability that he could better assist Zhu Qizhen. Otherwise, if he was an idiot, it wouldn't be long before he was eaten up by Jining. The sixth young master didn't want either side to become stronger. What he needed was balance. Only then could he show his importance. Yang Qindong would have more room to display his abilities. The two emperors kept each other in check, so he could be sandwiched between them and reap the benefits. Now that the matter is settled, the next step is to prepare for the war. That's right, is there any news from Crimson City? Yang Qindong returned to the study and looked at Tiger's Mane. They're already on their way to the capital. They're coming in small groups so that they won't attract attention. Tiger's Mane knew what Yang Qindong was asking about and respectfully replied. The sixth young master who had grown up with him was now Marquis. The young master wasn't even 20 yet, but his future was bright. Tiger's Mane wouldn't be a nobody if he followed such a master. All right, I understand. The young master is sleepy. If there's nothing important, don't call me. Yang Qindong waved his hand and walked toward the bedroom next to the study. Hu Yan, Xiao Yin, and the others had been waiting there for a long time. Although they might not be able to do anything with them around, it was still better to be with beauties than with those incomplete eunuchs who only knew how to fight for power. On the road 5 li away from the Yang clan manor, the bustling scene had disappeared. After Jining and Chao Jixiang left, Tang Tong, who had stayed behind, was also taken away. Tang Tong had chosen to leave with Jining. This was Yang Qindong's intention. He didn't keep idle people here. Unless it was Yang Xie's personal army, he couldn't be at ease with anyone guarding the Yang family manor. As for who Tang Tong would choose to leave with, Yang Qindong didn't ask. Instead, he left the decision to himself. When Jining and Chao Jixiang had both extended an olive branch to him, he had ultimately chosen to return to the capital with Jining. His subordinates had all settled down in the capital, and if he were to go somewhere else, the morale of the army would be shaken. Jining had brought 3,000 embroidered uniform guards with her when she came. When she returned, she brought 4,000 men with her. As soon as he entered the capital, he went straight to the imperial city to ask Zhu Qiyu about his plans. In the inner hall of the palace, after Zhu Qiyu learned about Jin Ying's experience at Yangjia village, he frowned. A country divided into two emperors. Won't this cause the great Ming dynasty to be divided? No matter what, Zhu Qiyu was still a descendant of the Zhu family. He also valued the Zhu family's country very much. It was not unreasonable for him to have such thoughts. Jin Ying didn't think too much about it. He just wanted to hold on to power. As for whether or not the country would be divided, that was a matter for the future. Your Majesty, this subject also knows that this is not a perfect plan, but I truly cannot think of a better one. Once Yingzong returns to the capital, he will not allow himself to be captured without a fight. After all, he has been emperor for so many years, and many people are loyal to him. If he raises his arm and receives even more support, we might not even have a place to stay. It would be better to slow down for now. I trust that with your Majesty's benevolence, it won't be long before you have even more people sincerely submit to you. At that time, wouldn't it be very easy for the realm to fall into your Majesty's hands? Jin Ying placed Zhu Qiyu in a very high position, her eyes brimming with confidence. These words spurred Zhu Qiyu on, filling him with confidence for the future. Fine. This is all we can do. But we still need to prevent even more officials from leaving with Yingzong. We will leave this matter to you. Jin Ying patted his chest and promised, Your Majesty, be at ease. This subject will definitely not allow any more officials to leave the capital. This was a chance to prove himself. If he did a good job, Daizong would naturally think highly of him. He did not dare to be the slightest bit careless. Hebei's Baoding Prefecture, a strategic town more than 300 li from the capital of the Great Ming Dynasty. At this time, Zhu Qizhen was resting here under the protection of Yang Wu and Xiao Feng. Now that he was in Baoding Prefecture, he was able to obtain some news from the capital. When he heard that his younger brother, Zhu Qiyu, had ascended to the throne and taken the title of Emperor Jing, Zhu Qizhen's rage was easy to imagine. He had kindly allowed his brother to supervise the country, but now that he was gone, his brother had proclaimed himself emperor and seized all his property. No one would be able to accept this. Logically speaking, he should have charged back to the capital and questioned his brother about what he was up to. But this was not a child's play. If it was not done well, he was afraid that he would not be able to return alive. Zhu Qizhen suppressed the anger in his heart and stopped at Baoding Mansion, waiting for Yang Qindong to send back the news. In the Tumu Fortress incident, Zhu Qizhen had seen how formidable Yang Qindong was. His actions could be said to be a model example of preparing for a rainy day. This was especially true for this mercenary army. On their way here, they had killed almost all the threats in the bud. Just based on what he saw, he didn't know how many groups of Vala cavalry had been wiped out before they could discover them. Their methods were powerful, their training was thorough, and their movements were nimble. Not even the elites of the Great Ming Dynasty could compare to them. After Yang Qindong left, Zhu Qizhen had communicated with Xiao Feng many times, hoping to use this army for his own use. He had even tried to tempt them with the promise of a beautiful future. But the results were not very good. After interacting with them, he realized that this was an army that only recognized money and not people. According to Xiao Feng, as long as you gave them money, they would work for you. As for promises, they could forget about them. They were far less practical than money. Moreover, because of Zhu Qizhen's status, Xiao Feng's hiring fee was 3 times that of Yang Qindong's. In other words, for every mission, a group of 100 people would need at least 3 million taels of silver, and this was the kind that had to be paid in advance. The army had been defeated and all their weapons had been lost. Where would Zhu Qizhen find the money to support such a large expenditure? He could only think of transferring money from the national treasury after entering the capital. But now that Zhu Qiyu was the emperor, he could forget about the national treasury. This made Zhu Qizhen feel even more dejected. At one point, Zhu Qizhen even had to consider where he would go in the future. If Yang Qindong did not care about him, what would he do? He would not even have the ability to protect himself. This worry disappeared without a trace 3 days later. Chao Jixiang arrived, and with him were 3,000 embroidered uniform guards. Under the lead of Beta Persei, Chao Jixiang successfully reported to Yingzong. As soon as he saw Yingzong, he immediately knelt on the ground and shouted, "Long live the emperor!" At this moment, Zhu Qizhen felt a sense of superiority. He even had the thought of bringing an army to the capital to seize the throne. Just as this thought appeared, he saw Xiao Feng and the others leave. The heroic spirit that had just appeared in his heart disappeared without a trace. After seeing the strength of this mercenary army, he began to despise the embroidered uniform guards in his heart. Chao Jixiang arrived, and after seeing Yingzong and the 9 officials, he gave them a detailed account of what had happened in the capital. At the end, he even mentioned that Yang Qindong had been made a marquis and his idea of 2 emperors ruling the country. 2 emperors ruling the country. After hearing Chao Jixiang's recount, Minister of War Kuang Yi and Minister of Revenue Wang Zhuo glanced at each other. How could they not know that doing this would be tantamount to splitting the great Ming dynasty? However, what better way was there to deal with this than now? Different from Kuang Yi and Wang Zhuo, the other 7 officials were secretly happy. If Zhu Qizhen really went to Nanjing and proclaimed himself as emperor, then it was obvious that they would be promoted by 1 or even 2 ranks. For example, the Right Assistant Minister of Justice Ding Xian could become the Minister of Justice, the Right Assistant Minister of Works Wang Yonghe could also become the Minister of Works, the Left Assistant Minister of Rights Yang Shan would become the Minister of Rights, and the Right Deputy Imperial Censorate Deng Li would also be promoted by 1 rank and become the Imperial Censorate. This was a real benefit. Originally, they had lost the battle together and were prepared to be demoted or even lose their positions. Now, they could even be promoted by 1 rank. Who wouldn't be happy? After the officials received the benefits, they would naturally try to persuade Zhu Qizhen to go to Nanjing and proclaim himself as emperor. Regarding this, Zhu Qizhen did not immediately make a decision. Instead, he said that he needed to think about it. Empress Qian also came. Mao Mu had taken over the role of the eunuch of Qing. He had served the empress well and had gained her trust. In this small courtyard of Baoding Mansion, the husband and wife met. Empress Qian's tears flowed out uncontrollably. "Empress, don't cry. I'm fine." Holding Empress Qian's arm, Zhu Qizhen's face showed a rare trace of gentleness. "Well, as long as the emperor is fine, as long as the emperor is fine. I think it's better for the emperor to go to Nanjing and proclaim himself as emperor. No matter what, you can be safe for a while." Empress Qian took the initiative to talk about moving south, which was completely different from her usual politics. Zhu Qizhen was very curious about Empress Qian's dissuasion. "Why does the emperor say so? Did others teach you?" "No." Empress Qian shook her head. "Your concubine has lived in the palace for a long time and has seen that the Mastiff King has managed the imperial city well, and with the assistance of eunuch Qing and the others, he now holds great power. If the emperor were to go to the capital, there would definitely be a major battle. In this case, the odds are against you." Originally, Zhu Qizhen had thought that Empress Qian had been instigated to say such words of dissuasion. Now, hearing this, Zhu Qizhen understood that the situation in the capital had truly changed. Even the empress, who rarely asked about politics, could sense it. As he cursed Zhu Qiyu, Jining, and the others for being shameless, he began to consider the matter of moving south. That night, Zhu Qizhen appeared in front of Chao Jixiang and the other officials, his face radiant. He said that he agreed to move south, but he could not let the Mastiff King off so easily. He wanted to go to the capital to ask for people and money, as well as the families of the officials, especially Crown Prince Zhu Jianchen, to be brought out of the imperial city. As long as Zhu Qizhen agreed, the other officials naturally would not object. After 2 days of discussion, they came up with a plan. In the end, Chao Jixiang led 1,000 embroidered uniform guards to escort Kuang Yi and Wang Zhuo to the capital to negotiate with Zhu Qiyu. Chapter 163. The Capital. News suddenly emerged that Zhu Qizhen did not die on the battlefield. It was only a substitute for Hu Ben that had died. This news was like a gust of wind that had grown wings, quickly reaching the homes of the officials. For a moment, many of them were shocked and at a loss of what to do. 5 days after the news appeared, Guang Yi and Wang Zhua, who had followed Yingzong to the battlefield, entered the capital under the protection of 1,000 embroidered uniform guards. Their appearance confirmed the news. Soon after, another piece of news appeared. Yingzong would not return to the capital and would instead accompany Nanjing to proclaim himself as emperor. For a time, the great Ming would have 2 emperors ruling together. For a good country to have 2 emperors, although they were both surnamed Zhu and shared the same ancestor, it could not be considered a split. However, as time passed, the situation would naturally develop. Many far-sighted officials could see this fact. However, before they could wonder why such a change had occurred, another piece of news appeared that made them dizzy. Yingzong would need many officials to proclaim himself as emperor in Nanjing. If any of the officials in the capital were willing, they could follow Guang Yi and Wang Zhua to Nanjing to take up their posts. Should they pledge loyalty to the current substitute emperor Zhu Qiyu or the previous emperor Zhu Qizhen? This was a choice that was placed in front of the officials. For a moment, each of the officials began to make their own calculations and began to consider the gains and losses in this matter. Compared to the officials in the capital who had to make a choice about their future, Yang Qindong in the Yang family manor was very carefree. He spent his days writing and painting in the manor or improving his relationship with his women. He was extremely busy. It was worth mentioning that during these few days of rest, Yang Qindong had taken in Lady Xiang. This woman, who looked like the young 13th mistress, had a strange fragrance and an enchanting figure, which made him fall into a land of gentleness, making him feel very uncomfortable. On the other hand, although Hu Yan had a few intimate actions with Yang Qindong, she had always scrupulously adhered to her bottom line. In her words, the first time had to be reserved for the wedding night in Lulang. Yang Qindong did not insist on this. When it came to matters of the heart, he had always pursued success when the conditions were right. He would never force anyone. Beta Persei, Yang Wu, and Xiao Feng returned to Yang Manor and set up a tight blockade around the perimeter. Yang Qindong, who had always attached great importance to his own safety, would never allow anyone to have the possibility of threatening his safety. Just like that, the days passed in a seemingly pleasant manner. Until a guest suddenly came to visit. Yang Qindong had no choice but to welcome him personally. He even went to the entrance of the manor. It was for no other reason than the fact that the person who had come was the imperial guardian of the embroidered uniform guard, Hu Changning, Hu Yan's father. In terms of official position, Hu Changning could be considered Yang Qindong's subordinate, so he did not need to personally welcome him. But from Hu Yan's point of view, Yang Qindong had to personally welcome him to show his sincerity and politeness. Hu Changning only brought Gao Sheng, a lieutenant. When the two of them successfully arrived at the entrance of Yang Manor, they saw Yang Qindong standing at the entrance. Beside him stood Tiger's Mane and Beta Persei, 2 servants. Yang Qindong was first conferred the title of Loyal Earl by Yingzong to thank him for saving his life on the battlefield. Then, he was conferred the title of Loyal Marquis by Dai Zong. At the same time, he also held the position of commander of the embroidered uniform guard. If the former was an empty position, then the latter was real power. He was not even 20 years old, yet he had received such an honor. This was extremely rare even when the great Ming dynasty was founded. Yang Qindong did it. The most important thing was that when Hu Changning arrived, he was still able to stand at the entrance and greet him. Just this alone made Hu Changning's originally cold face a little more gentle. Greetings to Uncle Hu. When Hu Changning rode closer, Yang Qindong cupped his fists and greeted him with the etiquette of a junior. This showed that he did not intend to talk to him in terms of official position, which allowed Hu Changning to avoid a lot of awkwardness. Good, the 6th young master is young and promising, making people envious. I believe that official Yang would be very gratified if he knew in the underworld. Since Yang Qindong did not greet him in terms of official position, Hu Changning spoke in terms of human relations. When he said these words, there was no doubt that he was an elder. Please. Yang Qindong smiled at Hu Changning and then made an inviting gesture. Beta Persei took the initiative to lead the horse, and the uncle and nephew walked side by side from the entrance to the Yang clan manor. In the main hall, the guest and the host sat down, and Xiao Yin personally served tea to Hu Changning. He couldn't help but take a few more glances at this maid who had been serving Yang Qindong since childhood. Sure enough, she was very beautiful. Seeing Xiao Yin, Hu Changning naturally asked about his daughter. When he found out that Hu Yan had secretly left home and went to the Yang clan manor, her father was naturally furious. But at the time, Dai Zong had just ascended the throne, and because he was afraid that the officials below him would cause trouble, he was confined at home and could not go out. Later on, when the situation was not so tense, the news of Yang Qindong's return spread to the capital. Moreover, he heard that there were several storms outside the Yang clan manor, making it impossible for him to come. Finally, when the Yang clan manor had obtained a temporary peace, he took the initiative to visit. First, he wanted to see his daughter. If possible, it would be better to bring her back. After all, Hu Yan's actions at the time could be called world-shocking. Second, he wanted to ask Yang Qindong about Ying Zong's situation. More importantly, he wanted to know what choice the Hu clan would make in the dual emperor reign. When he saw Xiao Yin, Hu Zhangning opened his mouth and said, "My beloved daughter has accompanied the Yang family's seventh sister to the Yang manor for some time now. Her grandmother and mother miss her very much. Would it be possible for her to return to the Hu estate with me?" Accompanying Yang Duo to the Yang clan manor was just an excuse. After all, a girl's reputation was very important. In the face of Hu Changning's tactful request to bring Hu Yan back, Yang Qindong naturally had no reason to refuse. "Okay, Xiao Yin, go inform Yan, to return to the Hu estate." "Oh." Xiao Yin agreed and turned to leave. However, the bystanders couldn't see that there was a trace of reluctance on her face. Ever since Yang Qindong called the girls together and made a few requests, they became a group of fighting. They really were like sisters. They already had very deep feelings for each other. The news of Hu Changning's arrival at the Yang clan manor quickly spread to the rear court. Hu Yan was clearly a bit out of her wits. After adapting to life in the Yang clan manor, she didn't want to go back. However, she knew that Yang Qindong had no reason to refuse her father. Xiao Yin saw that Hu Yan was worried and volunteered to serve tea in the front hall. She wanted to inquire about the news. She didn't expect that the young master would so readily agree to Hu Changning's request. How could she not be disappointed? When Xiao Yin left and only Yang Qindong, Hu Changning, and Tiger's Mane were left in the room, Lord Hu showed a hesitant expression. "Uncle Hu, if you have something to say, just say it. There are no outsiders here." When Yang Qindong said there were no outsiders, he naturally meant Tiger's Mane, who was always in charge of protecting him. It's actually nothing much. I'm sure the sixth young master already knows about the dual emperor rule. However, I don't know what your choice will be. Will you go to Nanjing or continue to stay here?" Hu Changning asked with an awkward expression. No matter what, he was a man of 40 years old. When he encountered something, it was fine if he didn't have any ideas. However, he actually wanted to ask Yang Qindong, who was much younger than him. This made him feel a little embarrassed. However, this was what his father, Hu Ming, wanted. Hu Ming's original words were, "Ask the loyal marquis whether you want to go or stay." This matter was originally caused by him. I'm sure he already has a judgment. Thus, this trip to the Yang clan manor was made. Picking up his daughter was only one of the reasons. His true goal was to find out what Yang Qindong's intentions were. "Me?" Yang Qindong pointed at himself, then chuckled. "Of course I can't leave. There's the Yang clan manor here, and there's the sky beyond heaven and the immortal abode in the capital. If I leave, I'm afraid that these properties will be seized by others. Yang Qindong expressed that he wouldn't leave, but his reason was that his properties were all here, and it wasn't convenient for him to leave. This answer clearly didn't satisfy Hu Changning. I'm sure the sixth young master has made quite a bit of money these days. Why would he care about this little bit of silver? That's true, but who in this world would complain about having too much money? Isn't that right, Uncle Hu? Yang Qindong maintained his usual smile. It seemed incomparably sincere, but it was impossible to tell what he was thinking. Yes, yes. Hu Changning couldn't see through Yang Qindong's thoughts, so he could only smile. But after smiling, his expression began to fluctuate. It was clear that he was wondering whether or not he should directly ask Yang Qindong what the Hu clan should do in the face of two emperors. Asking too much would only make him seem incompetent, but before he came, his father had repeatedly warned him that he had to ask Yang Qindong's intentions. If it was just for the sake of face, wouldn't he have made this trip in vain? Wouldn't he have failed to live up to his father's expectations? Hu Xiangning, who had something on his mind, looked unhappy and even had some entanglements. All of this was seen by Yang Qindong. He knew that this was his future father-in-law, so he couldn't not give him face. He smiled and took the initiative to ask, Uncle Hu, what do you and Grandpa Hu think about the matter of two emperors? He really didn't want to call Yang Qindong Grandpa, but given their seniority, Yang Qindong had no choice but to do so. But when he did, he still felt a little awkward. Hu Changning hadn't thought about this. He was just worrying about how to ask this question, and now that Yang Qindong had taken the initiative to ask, he was immediately overjoyed. In truth, I would like to hear Honorable Nephew's opinion on this matter. I can't speak of an opinion, but if I must, I would like to give Uncle Hu 4 lines of poetry, Yang Qindong said with a smile. Chapter 164. What are the 4 sentences? Hu Xiangning's interest was piqued. Everyone said that Yang Qindong was a genius. Presumably, the following words would not disappoint him. Sure enough, after Yang Qindong pondered for a moment, he slowly opened his mouth and said, if he is strong, then he is strong. If he is strong, then he is strong. If he is tyrannical, then he is tyrannical. The moon shines over the river. This was the record of the 9 yang divine art in the heavenly sword and dragon saber. It meant that no matter how strong or fierce the enemy was, one could treat it as a breeze blowing over the mountain. The moon shines over the river. Although it could affect one's body, it could not cause the slightest harm. However, how could one not harm one's body? It meant that in the face of the chaos of the outside world, as long as one stayed strong and worked hard to improve one's abilities in all aspects, one would be unharmed. Hu Ming was originally a capable official and had been the Minister of Rights for many years. It could be said that he had disciples all over the world. His son, Hu Xiangning, had also grown up. With this kind of strength, whether it was following Ying Zong or Dai Zong, there would not be any problems. As long as he stayed within his position, no one could easily touch him. Not to mention, there was also Yang Qindong helping from the side. He would not watch as something happened to the Hu family. In history, even when Ying Zong ascended to the throne, until his death, Hu Ming was still firmly seated in the high position of the Minister of Rights. It was not until he was over 80 years old that he resigned from his position after Ying Zong succeeded in seizing the family. From this, it could be seen that he was originally an evergreen tree in the bureaucracy. How could anyone move him just because they wanted to? Hu Xiangning did not think so much at this time. He was still repeating the 4 sentences that Yang Qindong said. After pondering over it, a smile slowly appeared on his face. Obviously, he had understood Yang Qindong's meaning. He was warning him that the most important thing was to improve his own strength. As for whether he followed Ying Zong or Dai Zong, he could do it with ease. Many thanks. After understanding everything, Hu Xiangning immediately cupped his fist and bowed to Yang Qindong. Yang Qindong naturally could not accept it. He immediately bowed back. Then, the two looked at each other and smiled. After Hu Zhangning got the result he wanted, he left. Hu Yan also left with him. When she left, her eyes were filled with reluctance. Yang Qindong felt very sorry for Hu Yan. Seeing her get into the carriage and about to leave, he suddenly cupped his fists to Hu Zhangning and said, "Uncle Hu, in a moment, nephew will send someone to the Hu estate to discuss marriage. Please allow me to marry Yan, Hu Zhangning's expression faltered slightly upon hearing this before a look of elation appeared on his face. Good, good, I'll go back and tell father, mother, and Yenner's mother about this. Thank you for your trouble. Yang Qindong continued to thank him with cupped fists. When he looked towards the carriage, Hu Yan's face was already flushed red. It was impossible to tell if she was happy or excited. Tiger's mane saw everything. He walked up to Yang San and patted him on the shoulder. All right, the more casual young master is with you, the more he doesn't treat you as an outsider. You should be happy. Also, can't you see how busy the young master is? The wedding is near, and the young master has to personally plan and participate in everything. It's a pity that there's not much we can do to help. By the way, when the young master is celebrating, there can be no accidents. If anyone has the intention to cause trouble, there's no need to report it. Just kill them. If there's any responsibility, I'll bear it. Yes, there won't be any mistakes. Don't worry, Chief. When Yang San said this, his eyes narrowed, and a cold aura emanated from his body. Without Yang Qindong, he wouldn't be where he was today. If anyone dared to cause trouble on the wedding day, they'd definitely be tired of living. Soon, they'd become a corpse without any warmth. Yang San left quietly, just like how he had come. Even in the Yang manor, very few people had seen him, and even fewer people knew of him. He was also the strongest hidden chess piece in the Yang family system. Usually, he wouldn't appear in front of everyone, but once he appeared, it often meant that something important was going to happen. Yang Qindong didn't ask when Yang San left. At this time, he was teaching the servant, Yang Si, how to use the camera. That's right, the camera. This was something that shouldn't appear in this era, because Yang Qindong's wedding had been taken out. If there was something good, it had to be used. Only in this way could its value be reflected. Although taking out the camera was indeed a bit too shocking, in order to leave this beautiful memory and commemoration, Yang Qindong still did it without hesitation. As soon as this camera that could capture a person's shadow appeared, it immediately attracted a lot of exclamations. If Yang Qindong hadn't been prepared, Yang Si, who had just received it, would have directly thrown it to the ground. People in ancient times were very superstitious. They believed that the shadow was also an important part of the body. They even believed that their 7 souls and 6 spirits could be hidden in it. Now that this thing could clearly capture a person's shadow and even project it, it was no wonder that people were afraid. Xiao Yin was a bit braver. Of course, this didn't mean that she wasn't afraid of anything, but because her relationship with Yang Qindong was closer than others. Naturally, this question was left to her to ask. Young master, what kind of witchcraft is this? It can capture a person's shadow. Will it turn the person who is captured into an idiot? Ah! Yang Qindong's mouth was wide open. He was stunned by the question. Yang Qindong's ability to adapt was originally very strong, but he was still defeated by this sudden and unexpected question. Seeing that Xiao Yin didn't seem to be joking and had a very serious expression, he helplessly shook his head and explained, "This is an advanced product brought about by scientific advancement. As for the specific principles, I'm afraid that young master can't explain it clearly to you. But don't worry, this thing can't capture a person's soul, so don't worry." When Yang Qindong said not to worry, Xiao Yin seemed to feel a lot more at ease. At least she dared to walk in front of the camera and even dared to make a few poses that she thought were beautiful. But the others didn't have that much courage. Every time Yang Si raised the camera and pointed it at them, there would always be a burst of chaos and shouting. It felt like a machine gun that could kill people. Wherever it aimed, people would fall to the ground. The camera was just a killing machine. In addition, Yang Qindong also took out a lot of new songs. For example, Hua Feng's Big Bridal Sedan, Intimate Lover, Full Moon Flower, and the ready-made Wedding March that he had prepared beforehand. For this, he took out a set of audio equipment from the big warehouse and charged it up in the big warehouse. He was only waiting for the wedding day to use it. In addition, Yang Qindong also prepared a very luxurious carriage. The wheels were made of soft rubber tires taken from the big warehouse. There were even shock absorbers installed on the carriage to ensure its comfort. The outside of the carriage was filled with all kinds of colored balloons, making it look very beautiful and beautiful. At the same time, he also made a few sets of beautiful wedding dresses according to his own design. These were all custom-made by the Crimson City's clothing factory. The factory's director, Zhou Hua, personally supervised the completion. It was said that when making these new wedding dresses, her daughter, Wan Xiaoyu, who was the Crimson City's publicity team leader, cried because of it. Wan Xiaoyu had reached the age where she knew about feelings. She had long regarded herself as the sixth young master's woman. It was just that because she was still young, she had no chance to be Yang Qindong's wife. Seeing the man she liked was going to marry someone else, how could she not be sad? For this matter, her father Wan Qi, the director of the power plant, and mother Zhou Hua, the director of the clothing factory, talked to her for a long time. They said that a capable person like the sixth young master was destined to have more than one woman. Xiaoyu grew up quickly. When she grew up, she would naturally have the opportunity to become the sixth young master's woman. Moreover, several sets of wedding dresses were taken out. Except for one set that was sent to Hu Yan in the Hu mansion, the others were taken away by Qiao Yin, Lady Xue, and Lady Xiang. In their words, they were also attending the wedding day. According to Yang Qindong's intention, they were going to be the bridesmaids of the bride, but in fact, they were also completing their wedding with sixth young master. In this regard, Yang Qindong acquiesced. In the feudal society, even the emperor only had one empress. It was impossible for him to have several wives at the same time, so it was impossible for him to give them a grand wedding. Therefore, it was a good thing to take this opportunity to hold all of them together. The bride had a wedding dress, and Yang Qindong prepared a suit for himself. The pure white suit was tailor-made, making Yang Qindong look more handsome and sunny. As the groomsmen, Tiger's Mane, Beta Persei, and Yang Wu were dressed in black suits, looking very energetic. As for the several servants, Yang San, as the deputy director of the security bureau and the actual helmsman, naturally had to protect everything in the dark. Yang Lu was responsible for the security on the surface. In this way, the manpower was put to good use. 3 days passed in the blink of an eye. On the 6th day of October, the Yang family manor was already decorated with festive decorations. Colored balls, ribbons, and bright red, happy characters were posted everywhere. In front of Yang Xi's camera, amid a burst of firecrackers, the wedding procession set off just as dawn broke. Yang Qindong, dressed in a white suit, was sitting in a special carriage. Beside him were Tiger's Mane and Beta Persei. Yang Wu was in charge of driving the carriage. Under the protection of Yang Lu, Qiu Vi, and Dao Shao, they went to the capital. In the dark, Xiao Feng and Leng Feng were on guard at all times to ensure the safety of the young master. The Hu mansion in the capital was also decorated with ribbons, giving people a feeling of jubilation. Qiao Yin, Madame Xue, Madame Xiang, and the others had arrived at the Hu mansion a day in advance to accompany Hu Yan through the most difficult night before dawn. When the sky brightened, the women began to get busy and put on the new wedding dresses that had never been seen before. On the side of the road leading to the Hu mansion, there were already embroidered uniform guards standing guard. Chapter 165. After a portion of the officials left for Nanjing to follow Yingzong, the remaining officials in the capital were all restored to their original positions. Hu Zhangning was also restored to his position as the guardian of the embroidered uniform guard. In addition, Yang Qindong was still the commander of the embroidered uniform guard, so it was only natural that he would send some embroidered uniform guards to help out. Not only that, but Yang Qindong also ordered that any embroidered uniform guard who came to help out would be rewarded with 100 taels of silver. For a time, the embroidered uniform guard fought amongst themselves for this mission. Those who were able to come here could be considered lucky. When the time came, the carriage from the Yang clan arrived in front of the Hu estate. Yang Qindong, dressed in a white suit, stepped out of the spacious carriage. The wedding ceremony had officially begun. The Immortal Abode's band was already waiting for Yang Qindong to arrive. The music began to play, and could be faintly heard from several streets away. Hu Yan, who was dressed like a fairy in a white wedding dress, walked up to Yang Qindong, accompanied by Qiao Yin, Madame Snow, and the bride, who were also wearing a wedding dress and looked very beautiful. Hu Yan's blushing face perfectly explained what it meant to put the moon and flowers to shame. What was different from the other women was that there were two children who were only 5 or 6 years old standing behind Hu Yan, a boy and a girl who looked like a golden couple. They each pulled up a corner of the white wedding dress so that the long, fluttering wedding dress would not fall to the ground, but also showed her magnanimity. There was no red veil. This was Yang Qindong's idea. After reporting this to the Hu clan, Yang Qindong received their support. Thus, Yang Qindong took the bride, Hu Yan, who could walk on her own, to the Hu clan's main hall. Here, they knelt down and kowtowed to Hu Zhongning and his wife. The completion of this step was completely recorded by the camera. From the footage, it could be seen that Hu Zhongning and Madame Shui's faces were extremely pale. It was clear that they were also frightened by the equipment that could record their figures. After paying his respects to the elders, Yang Qindong carried Hu Yan out of the Hu estate. Along the way, the courtyard was filled with all kinds of gifts that Yang Qindong had given to the Hu clan. There was no need to introduce the types of items. In short, someone had calculated the total value of these items after the event. The total value of these items was over 1 million taels of silver. Just this amount alone was enough to shock countless people. This was one of the most beautiful stories in the capital, because not even the emperor would be willing to part with so many good things. From this matter, it could also be seen that Yang Qindong valued Hu Yan. The inside and outside of the immortal abode were already packed with people. In order to congratulate the patriarch on his wedding today, all the diners will have a 50% discount. Even the commoners who didn't come to the immortal abode to spend money could still enjoy the delicacies they had prepared. The premise was that the whole family had to come together. At the very least, the couple had to bring a child and bring their own lunch boxes. At that time, all the children who came would receive a delicious little pastry. The news had been released 3 days ago. By morning, the entire street in front of the immortal abode was packed with people. As a result, the embroidered uniform guards who were responsible for the security of the area were given a lot more work to do. Fortunately, the people who came to receive the delicacies and pastries were all very well behaved. Some entered and some left, so there wasn't much panic. After leaving the Hu estate, the bridegroom, Yang Qindong, personally drove the carriage. Hu Yan, Qiao Yin, Madame Shui, and Madame Xiang were seated inside. Yang Qindong, who was driving the carriage, sang the bridal sedan in fear. Tiger's Mane and the others, who had long since learned how to sing, sang along loudly. When the sun comes out, I climb the mountain. When I reach the peak, I want to sing. My song floats to my little sister. When she hears my song, she smiles, Yang Qindong's cheerful voice rang out. Sitting in the spacious and comfortable carriage, Hu Yan and the other girls were filled with happiness. As they looked at the brightly colored balloons around the carriage, their faces were brimming with happiness. The carriage passed through the streets of the immortal abode. Along the way, one new song after another could be heard. All of them were joyous songs that suited the occasion, and the people who had come along to watch the show all cheered with joy. As they passed through the streets of the immortal abode and saw the crowded streets, Hu Yan and the other girls smiled at each other. This was the young master doing a good deed, as well as accumulating good karma. Although he had to spend some money to do so, in the eyes of the girls, the significance of this action was far more profound. The carriage finally left the capital, and under the protection of the embroidered uniform guards, it headed for the Yang clan manor. At this time, there were all sorts of carriages and bridal sedan chairs waiting outside the Yang clan manor. Many officials of the court were waiting here for the bridegroom to arrive. He had only been in the capital for a little more than a year, less than 2 years. However, Yang Qindong had used his own efforts to prove his strength. With money and power, who wouldn't give him this little bit of face? And this wasn't even mentioning the fact that he was marrying the granddaughter of the Minister of Rights, Hu Shao. Under the witness of many honored guests, Yang Qindong took Hu Yan's arm and led her to the main hall of the Yang clan manor, where the two principals were already seated. Yang Qindong and his wife were no longer present, so the ones presiding over Yang Qindong's wedding were his big brother Yang Gong and big sister Yang Fei. The entire Yang clan had come to Yang Qindong's wedding, and even his second brother Yang Rang was in the crowd. However, it was clear that his complexion was rather unsightly. He had originally believed that with his sixth brother dead, he, as the second brother, would be able to openly take over the family property. He hadn't expected that Yang Qindong would return, and in such a domineering manner, and even be conferred the title of Valiant Marquis. The affairs of the world were truly unpredictable, and Yang Rang had lost a great deal of face. For Yang Qindong's wedding, he had invited all the members of the Yang clan, including all the important ministers in the capital, but his second brother didn't send anything. This had already proved Yang Qindong's attitude. Even so, Yang Rang still came by himself. He knew that this might be an opportunity to change the relationship between himself and his sixth brother. In the main hall, Yang Gong was on the left and Yang Qindong was on the right, accepting the kneeling ceremony of Hu Yanxing, his new daughter-in-law. Under the insistence of Yang Qindong, they only completed the first bow to heaven and earth, and the second bow to the parents. As for the third step of entering the bridal chamber, it was cancelled. According to Yang Qindong, women didn't just stay at home to take care of their husbands and children. They could also do many other things that they liked to do. This was also called the liberation of women. Since it was liberation, then he would start with his wife. After communicating with Hu Yan in advance, and knowing that she didn't want to enter the bridal chamber so early and wait for a long time, he agreed to her request and allowed her to change into a beautiful qipao. Then, she reappeared in front of everyone and toasted the guests with him. When the ceremony reached this point, it was time for the wedding banquet to begin. For the important ministers, the banquet was also a part of their work. There were many things that were difficult to say and difficult to do, but they were often easily done with the passing of a cup. Yang Qindong's wedding gave everyone an opportunity to interact. For a moment, the ministers came and went, and it was very lively. However, this liveliness reached a climax when the bride, Hu Yan, and the 3 other women, changed into decent qipaos and appeared. Yang Qindong announced in front of everyone that today was not only the day he married Hu Yan, but also the day he took Qiao Yin, Lady Xue, and Lady Xiang as his concubines. After listening to Yang Qindong's announcement, the 3 women, who were completely unaware before, were so excited that their faces turned red. They originally thought that they were very happy to be able to follow Dong Shuai. With their status, they didn't dare to ask for anything. However, they didn't expect that happiness would come to them so quickly and so suddenly. In response, Hu Yan looked at them with a smile. She wasn't surprised at all. Obviously, she already knew about this news and must have agreed. Otherwise, Yang Qindong wouldn't do such a thing in public. He was marrying his wife and concubines on the same day. Although this kind of thing had happened before, most of the protagonists who did it were extremely desolate. However, no matter how one looked at it, Yang Qindong wasn't someone who was muddle-headed. At this point, the general public thought that it was normal for emperors to have many wives and concubines. They also thought that it was natural, and believed that China's ancient people practiced polygamy. However, this wasn't the case. Many modern people learned about ancient China through media such as movies, or web novels. At the same time, they often defined the social environment and culture of that era through the interpretation of the drama. Therefore, when the dramas performed were like the hotly discussed palace dramas such as Zhenhuan Zhuan, Rui Zhuan, Yanxi Strategy, and Do You Know It?, the general public would easily take the situation of the emperor and his ministers having many wives and concubines as a matter of course, and believe that the ancient Chinese people practiced polygamy. In fact, what we don't know is that China's marriage model since ancient times was mainly monogamy, and not the stereotypical polygamy and monogamy. The Great Ming Society's Archives No. 163 clearly recorded the punishment for those who violated the law. For ordinary people, if they have a wife but still marry her, they will be flogged 90 times and divorced. If they are over 40 years old and have no children, they will be allowed to marry concubines. Violators will be flogged 40 times. However, the rules weren't absolute. Very few people would take concubines. However, those who took concubines were mainly those with high social status. In other words, the higher the status, the more concubines they would take. Therefore, the imperial family naturally had the most concubines, followed by the important officials and the rich. Commoners rarely had the opportunity to take concubines. Therefore, taking concubines was considered a privilege in China's traditional culture. In the Great Ming Society's Archives No. 57, it clearly stated that taking concubines, as well as the number of concubines, had to be investigated by the Ministry of Rights. The heir and the prince had 4 concubines. The eldest son and the general had 3 concubines. It was true that Yang Qindong was the Marquis of Loyalty and Courage, so taking in 3 concubines wasn't that much of a violation of the rules. However, why didn't he mention it in advance? Since no one knew about it, didn't that mean that this matter wasn't reported to the Ministry of Rights? Chapter 166. With that in mind, the officials all turned to look at the officials from the Ministry of Rights who had come to attend the banquet. Hu Xiao was the Minister of Rights, and had been for many years at that. At least a third of the officials in the ministry had been promoted by him or had close ties to him. This time, his granddaughter was getting married. Many officials from the Ministry of Rights had come to show their support. When these officials noticed the gazes of their peers, they all lowered their heads. This proved that Yang Qindong hadn't informed the Ministry of Rights about taking concubines. As if he'd known that everyone would react this way, Yang Qindong smiled at them and said, "I didn't inform the Ministry of Rights beforehand, but I did inform the Minister of Rights. I'll make it up to you later. I only did this because I wanted to give the 3 of them a pleasant surprise." As he spoke, Yang Qindong's gentle gaze fell on Xiao Yin, Madame Shui, and Madame Xiang. His gaze was filled with love. Yang Qindong's actions had indeed given the 3 women a pleasant surprise. As for their reactions, they'd all been recorded by Yang Si. When the officials heard that Yang Qindong had told the Minister of Rights that they'd be reported to the Minister of Rights after the banquet, they all came to a sudden realization. Since that was the case, what did they have to worry about? Besides, what did it have to do with them? In reality, Yang Qindong hadn't told Hu Xiao about this. What kind of joke was this? He was marrying someone else's granddaughter, and he was also marrying 3 concubines at the same time. It would be strange if Hu Xiao agreed. However, he dared to say this because he was sure that Hu Xiao wouldn't expose him. Otherwise, if he got into trouble, Hu Yan would also suffer. When the results were announced, it first drew a lot of discussion, but Yang Qindong easily resolved it. After that, he led the 4 women in a toast to the guests. Speaking of which, Hu Yan and the others weren't women who only knew how to stay at home. They'd all seen the world, and with Yang Qindong's guidance, they didn't show any signs of fear. Instead, they generously raised their cups and toasted. The atmosphere was quite harmonious. At the same time, the Immortal Abode's band and actors began to sing and dance outside the Yang clan's courtyard. It was a lively scene. Among the guests, Han Ji also received Yang Qindong's wedding invitation. Out of camaraderie, he was pulled over by Shengguan Lv Gui. At this time, when he saw Yang Qindong with the 4 women, his teeth itched with hatred. "Commander, this Yang Qindong is getting bolder and bolder. He didn't even report taking concubines. He dared to act first and report later. This clearly shows that he doesn't put the laws of the great Ming dynasty in his eyes. We cannot allow this to continue." How could Lu Gui not know that Yang Qindong's actions today were a bit out of line? However, he knew that Han Ji's main motive was revenge. It was because his brother-in-law, Wang Go, had been killed by Yang Qindong. That was why he said those words with hatred. But no matter what kind of mentality he had, Han Ji was still one of them. If a superior wanted his subordinates to listen to his orders, he had to empathize with his subordinates. Thus, he nodded and said, "All right, we'll discuss it when we get back. We'll teach him a lesson." "Thank you, Commander, for your help." When Han Ji heard that LV Gui was finally ready to make a move, he couldn't help but be overjoyed. He quickly raised his arms and used Yang Qindong's wedding wine to toast LV Gui. The funny thing was that he was also scheming against Yang Qindong. All banquets must come to an end. Although the programs were endless, the guests still left one by one when the sky was almost dark. Among them, there was someone who didn't want to leave. That was the second brother, Yang Rang. At noon, Yang Qindong toasted each table. He had more or less spoken to the guests, but he acted as if he didn't see his second brother. Not only that, even his sisters-in-law treated him like heir. The facts had already shown that Yang Qindong was very angry with him. Since he had come today, he naturally wanted to use this opportunity to perform well and strive to turn hostility into friendship. "Second brother, let's go. Today is not suitable for doing other things." The eldest brother, Yang Gong, walked in front of Yang Rang with a face full of alcohol. The behavior of his second brother a while ago, even he was extremely unhappy after seeing it. But after all, they were still brothers. He couldn't just watch Yang Rang be unlucky. "Big brother." Seeing Yang Gong walk over, Yang Rang showed an amiable and even fawning smile. "Big brother, you must tell little Six that I did it for the good of the Yang family manor. In that case, even if I didn't do it, others would do it. At least if I did, I would have given the Yang family a way out, right?" Listening to Yang Rang's sophistry, Yang Gong was very disgusted. He could say so many reasons for doing bad things. He was really shameless to the extreme. "Okay, let's talk about it later. Let's go first." Yang Gong didn't agree. He just wanted to take his second brother away, so that he wouldn't stay and cause trouble and attract the displeasure of his sixth brother. If that happened, it would really spoil the beautiful atmosphere. His eldest brother did not agree to plead for mercy and just wanted to drag him away. How could Yang Rang be willing to comply? His face immediately changed. "All right, since eldest brother doesn't care about our brotherhood and is unwilling to help second brother to plead for mercy, then you can leave by yourself. In short, I will wait here. If little Six doesn't come out, I won't go anywhere today. I want to see if he really doesn't recognize me as his elder brother. If this matter spreads out, who will look good at that time?" Yang Rang shamelessly shook off Yang Gong's arm and then looked at the inner courtyard of the Yang family manor. He looked like he wouldn't leave until he saw the main person. "You." He didn't expect his brother to be such a person. Shamelessness is invincible. At this moment, Yang Gong didn't know what to do. At this moment, a group of people walked out from the inner courtyard. The person in the lead was a woman. It was the eldest sister of the Yang family, Yang Fei. Although they were all from the Yang family, the treatment was obviously different. When Yang Fei walked out, there were 4 brides beside her. Every one of them accompanied her and talked. From time to time, one could see the eldest sister of the Yang family smiling. When he saw his eldest sister walking out, Yang Rang quickly turned around to avoid her. He wasn't afraid of his eldest brother Yang Gong because his eldest brother's ability was mediocre and not worthy of his attention. However, his eldest sister was different. Most of them grew up following behind Yang Fei. When they were young, they were rarely taught a lesson by their eldest sister. As a result, when they grew up, there was still a fear in their hearts. Yang Rang wanted to avoid her, but now that most of the guests had left, there was only a limited number of people left. Yang Fei only needed to sweep her eyes and naturally saw him. When she saw that it was her disappointing second brother who was pacing back and forth, she immediately figured out what was going on. Her face immediately darkened. As the eldest sister, Yang Fei naturally hoped to see the young brothers and sisters united. Even if someone did something wrong, if she could give them a chance to forgive, she would be willing to give them the chance. However, as Yang Qindong's second brother, Yang Rang had done something wrong first, and then he wanted to seek justice on the day of the wedding. This was really a bit aggressive. She took large strides and arrived behind Yang Rang, who had just turned around. Yang Gong, who was standing at the side, saw Yang Fei first and quickly called out with a smile, "Eldest sister." When he heard his eldest brother's call, Yang Rang knew that he couldn't avoid it. He could only unwillingly turn around and force out a smile, "Hello, eldest sister." "Oh. You still recognize me as your eldest sister? Since that's the case, then leave immediately. Today is my little brother's wedding day. Do you have to stay here and cause trouble?" Yang Fei said with a cold face and a rude tone. "Ah. Eldest sister, that's not what I meant. I just want to talk to little six and explain what happened before." How could Yang Rang admit it? He spoke with a face full of excuses. Hearing Yang Rang call Yang Qindong little six as if he was the boss, Yang Fei was even angrier. She thought about how her little brother had done so many things for the Yang family and even saved Yingzong on the battlefield. That was how dangerous it was to be conferred the title of Marquis. However, there was someone in the family who was dragging her family down. This was truly a chilling action. If she was in Yang Fei's shoes, she would also feel very uncomfortable. With this anger, Yang Fei couldn't be bothered to be polite anymore. She turned to look at Beta Persei and the rest and said, "Go, chase Yang Rang out of the manor. If he doesn't leave, you can beat him until he leaves. I will bear all the consequences. I believe that even if father and mother are watching from the heavens, they won't blame me." Yes. Beta Persei had long found Yang Rang an eyesore. This person was lucky to have been born into the Yang family. If it had been anyone else, who knew how many times they would have died by now. After agreeing, Beta Persei strode forward and lifted Beta Persei off the ground with a thick arm. He didn't seem to use any effort to lift him off the ground. The pitiful Beta Persei was dragged out of the manor like a rabbit, then thrown to the ground. If little six had ordered someone to do this, he would naturally yell and scream, saying that the other party didn't respect his elder brother. However, since his eldest sister had ordered it, there was nothing he could do. He was the one who had been rude first. Now that he had been thrown out, he was reaping what he sowed. Even though he was still unwilling, Yang Rang had no choice but to stand up with the help of the servants outside the manor. He then entered the palanquin and left the place. In the study of the Yang manor, Yang Qindong was listening to Tiger's Mane's report. The report included the situation in the immortal abode, as well as the various performances of the officials who had attended the banquet today. The people from the security bureau had disguised themselves as attendants and wandered around the banquet, listening in on everyone's conversations. This was the true record of an official's appearance. At the very least, through this, Yang Qindong could see who had opinions of him and who were dissatisfied with him. "Young master, the embroidered uniform guard just sent someone to deliver this. They said that in order to stabilize the situation in the capital, young master is invited to the embroidered uniform guard's office tomorrow morning to discuss political matters." After Tiger's Mane reported the situation at the banquet, he told Yang Qindong the news he had just received. Chapter 167. Mao, Rabbit, time was from 5 to 7 o'clock, with 6 o'clock as the time. Letting Yang Qindong go to the meeting so early was obviously not to let the bridegroom have a good night's sleep. It was too obvious that he was deliberately making things difficult for Yang Qindong. In this regard, Yang Qindong just responded with a cold snort, and then ignored it as if he hadn't heard the news. After dealing with the business, Hu Mang tactfully excused himself. Today was the young master's big day, so he had to be tactful to stay far away from the scene. With no one bothering him anymore, Yang Qindong straightened his clothes and walked towards Hu Yan's courtyard in the inner courtyard. Tonight, he was going to perform the Duke of Zhou's rites with her. When he thought of this, his footsteps seemed to quicken. In the bridal chamber, Hu Yan, who had just sent away her elder sister Yang Fei, had returned. After removing her makeup, she changed into a red bridal dress and sat by the bed, waiting. At this time, the room was very quiet, and only the sound of Hu Yan's little heart beating could be heard. Although she had long thought that there would be a day like this, and even looked forward to it. But when she really arrived, she still felt a little nervous. In particular, the servant girl Qing was nowhere to be found, and no one accompanied her to talk, so the tense atmosphere was even more intense. Creak. The door was pushed open from the outside. Out of instinct, Hu Yan blurted out, "Is it Qing?" "What? You don't like Lulang, but Qing?" With a man's magnetic voice, Yang Qindong, who had changed into a loose red robe, stepped in. Seeing that it was Yang Qindong, Hu Yan's heart beat faster. "No, no. What do you mean by no? Do you like Lulang more or Qing more?" Yang Qindong knew that she was nervous, but he still teased her, which was also a way to relieve her tension. I like Lulang more." At this time, Hu Yan's voice was very low. If it weren't for Yang Qindong's good hearing, he probably wouldn't have heard what she was saying. After saying this, she had lowered her head. He didn't need to look to know how red her face was right now. Ha ha ha. After seeing the answer he was satisfied with, Yang Qindong strode forward, picked up Hu Yan, and put her on the bed. At the same time, he waved his sleeve, and all the red candles in the room were extinguished. I like Yan, too. After a short sentence, a series of rustling sounds could be heard, and then the moon, which was originally hanging in the sky, was now nowhere to be seen. Soon, the entire courtyard was filled with extravagant sounds, 10,000 words omitted. Happy time always passed quickly, and the sky slowly brightened. At the embroidered uniform guard's office, seeing that the time had passed and Yang Qindong still hadn't arrived, Han Ji acted as if he had won the lottery. He quickly went to LV Gui, who was sitting there with his eyes closed. "Commander, he didn't come. It seems like he doesn't take your words seriously at all." LV Gui didn't even open his eyes after hearing this. No one knew what he was thinking. His eyeballs kept rolling. According to Han Ji's understanding of LV Gui, he was really angry at this time. It seemed that Yang Qindong wouldn't have a good time. That was the truth. LV Gui still didn't open his eyes, but the words he said made Han Ji feel very relieved. Yang Qindong didn't listen to your orders. Suspend his duties first and spread this decision to all the embroidered uniform guards. Suspension for not attending the meeting, this was LV Gui's trap for Yang Qindong. Or it could be said that he had already planned this, so when he said this, he didn't hesitate at all. Yes. Han Ji was waiting for this sentence. After he agreed, he turned around and left. He was eager to spread the news and let all the embroidered uniform guards know. In the future, he would like to see how arrogant Marquis would be in the future. The embroidered uniform guards and the East Faction guards had always been the focus of the Security Bureau. If there was a situation here, it would be sent to the Yang family village and sent to the Director Tiger's man. As for when to show it to the young master, it was up to the director to decide whether the situation was serious or not. After tossing and turning for half the night, Hu Yan fell asleep tired. She vaguely felt that someone was moving beside her. In her mind, she suddenly thought that she was no longer the young lady of the Hu family, but the daughter-in-law of the Yang family. She immediately struggled to get up. Well, baby, sleep a little more. A woman must have enough sleep. Also, there are not so many rules here. Yang Qindong's voice came to her ear. Then she felt a heat on her forehead, and their lips came in close contact. After kissing Hu Yan's forehead, Yang Qindong walked out of the bedroom with a face full of energy. After going out, he saw that Shao Qing had already prepared the water and was waiting to serve Hu Yan. He smiled and said, "Don't disturb Yan, her first, let her sleep a little longer. Also, inform the cook, Yi Qiu'er, to immediately make a fresh nutritious breakfast and send it over when the young lady wakes up." Hearing that Yang Qindong was so concerned about her young lady, Xiaoqing's face was full of joy and she quickly agreed. Yang Qindong strode out of the inner courtyard. From afar, he saw Hu Mang waiting for him with a serious expression on his face. Seeing that Hu Mang's brows were almost knitted together, Yang Qindong approached him and asked, "What's wrong? Did something happen?" "Young master, there's a small matter. The embroidered uniform guards just sent a message saying that you didn't come to the meeting. Lu Gue and the others suspended your position in the embroidered uniform guards." Tiger's man's voice became heavier as he spoke. Obviously, he had a lot of opinions about this matter. Someone dared to make trouble for the young master. With his character, it was best to kill and teach them a good lesson. Suspended? That's fine. Since it's like this young master can have a good rest as a newlywed. Yang Qindong didn't care after hearing this. It was just a position in the embroidered uniform guards. He really didn't care about it. Moreover, something big was about to happen. Lu Gui's actions were just smashing his own foot with a rock. "Let's go for a jog." Not taking this information seriously, Yang Qindong smiled at Tiger's man and started his morning jog. Tiger's man was happy that the young master's mood wasn't affected by this. He was worried that the young master would be angered, but now it seemed that he worried too much. The young master's mind was as broad as the sea. The news that the valiant Marquis Yang Qindong's position in the embroidered uniform guards was suspended spread like a gust of wind to the ears of all the officials in the capital. Some of the older officials who believed that they had seen and experienced many things couldn't help but sigh. As expected, an official couldn't be too high profile. Just look at the commotion yesterday. Everyone in the capital knew about it. Wasn't he about to suffer retribution soon? Using this matter, who knew how many people called the younger generation of their families to teach them to endure silently, learn the way of the mean, and not stand out too much. As the main character of this matter, Yang Qindong wasn't as depressed as everyone thought. On the contrary, he was leading the 4 girls, plus 7th sister Yang duo, out of the Yang family manor, heading straight for a place not far away that the common people called Chicken Crow Mountain. Yang Qindong wanted to bring the 5 beauties to the barbecue. For this reason, he had Yi Qiu'er prepare a lot of ingredients. Tiger's man, Beta Persei, Qiu V's first guard, and 3 squads of Cold Front members accompanied them. Everyone left the manor. It was currently autumn. The maple leaves on the mountain were golden yellow, and the scenery along the way was indescribably beautiful. The 4 girls couldn't stop shouting. Women in ancient times rarely had the opportunity to go out like this. Even if they went out, they were often very strict and weren't allowed to casually look around. How was it like being with Yang Qindong, where they could do whatever they wanted? In the spacious and comfortable carriage, lying down wasn't a problem at all. Every time they saw beautiful scenery, they would take out their only camera to record the beauty. Because of this, the caravan also stopped and traveled. In the afternoon, they finally arrived at the foot of Chicken Crow Mountain, which was 30 li away. Soon, everyone set up the grill, held the charcoal, started the fire, prepared the ingredients, and fetched water. The guards also looked around with vigilant eyes. There wasn't the slightest bit of panic, which surprised the 4 girls and made them very happy. The environment in the wilderness was the easiest for people to let their thoughts run wild. Because of this, their mood was also very good. Later on, they even followed a few maids to make skewers out of curiosity. It wasn't enough to just do it themselves, so they even pulled Yang Qindong over. Thus, The dignified marquis of the Great Ming Dynasty actually started working there with the servants. This isn't good. Seventh sister Yang Duo really couldn't believe the scene in front of her. Her husband, Wang Go, used to be just an insignificant official, but he had always stayed away from the kitchen. The idea of a gentleman staying away from the kitchen was deeply rooted in people's hearts at that time. But look at Yang Qindong. Even though he had the title of marquis and owned such a large family property, he still worked with everyone. From this point alone, the biggest difference between him and the others was that Yang Qindong was different from others. There's nothing bad about it. Since we came out to play and eat, of course, the atmosphere will be better if everyone works together. Hu Yan and Yang Duo had the best relationship, and the distance between them was also the closest. Naturally, they heard the whispering just now. But Yang Duo still wanted to say something. No buts. Lu Lang didn't refuse. I think he is willing to do such a thing. As his sister, you don't have to care so much. You should hurry up and work. Don't be outdone by others. Hu Yan chuckled. After completing the experience of turning from a girl to a woman last night, her mind didn't seem to be as mature as before. At this time, she was completely like a child. If it wasn't for the torment last night, and her body didn't allow it, she would probably start jumping around in a while. Chapter 168. Yang Duo's doubts were quickly led astray by Hu Yan. In just a short while, not only did she not let her sixth brother Yang Qindong rest, she even took out a portion of the tasks in front of her and placed them in front of him. In her words, it was called, capable people do more work. When Yang Qindong was a soldier in his previous life, he did everything very quickly. Naturally, the speed at which he worked was not something these young ladies could compare to. With Yang Duo taking the lead, Hu Yan quickly placed her own skewers in front of Yang Qindong. Not only that, she also brought Xiao Yin, Lady Xue, and Lady Xiang's skewers over. Xiao Yin and the other two naturally did not dare to mess around like Hu Yan. They could only look at Yang Qindong with an awkward and slightly nervous expression. You guys are too much of a bully. Looking at the mountain of skewers in front of him, Yang Qindong showed a helpless expression, causing the women to laugh out loud. Even Tiger's Mane's wife, Feng and Yang Xi's wife, Mu Lily, could not help but cover their mouths and chuckle. At that moment, the two women were greeted by their husband's stern gaze. What the young master did with his wives was considered a pleasure in the boudoir. Outsiders were absolutely not allowed to comment on anything. Tiger's Mane and Yang Xi had been with Yang Qindong for a long time, so they naturally understood this principle. After being glared at, the two women curled their lips and looked as if they were not afraid. However, they turned around and busied themselves with their work. Obviously, they were not afraid of their husband, but they knew that they had to give face at the right time. This way, they could live a happy life. Looking at Yang Qindong, in the face of the work that was completely beyond one person's ability, he waved his hand and called Tiger's Mane, Beta Persei, and Yang Xi over. Put it on. I'll leave this work to the three of you. Ah! Young master, this. Tiger's Mane and the other two looked troubled. If they were asked to charge and break through enemy lines, they would definitely not object. However, when it came to this kind of work, the three of them were really a little embarrassed and unhappy. What is this? The young master asked you to do something, and you're still making excuses? Let me tell you, this job is going to be done by the three of you. You have to finish it. Also, spread the news to Crimson City, let them train a female army. The number doesn't need to be too big, just about 200 people will be enough. In the future, it's better to let them protect Madam. Also, it's better to let them do the delicate work. Yang Qindong sighed. He didn't want a group of men to protect his women. It would be inconvenient. It was better to prepare and train some female soldiers in advance. That's a good idea, a good idea. I've long heard from Xiao Feng that there are many girls in Crimson City who want to become soldiers, but other than entering the propaganda team, there doesn't seem to be a better opportunity. Now that we have a female army, the problem will be solved. Beta Persei laughed foolishly. Oh. What problem has been solved? Is it your marriage? Tiger's Mane laughed after hearing this. Among the few of them, Tiger's Mane and Yang Xi's personal problems had been solved. Only Beta Persei had not made any progress in this regard. It was no wonder that Tiger's Mane said this. No, no. The burly Beta Persei blushed when Tiger's Mane said this. He wanted to argue about something. However, when Yang Qindong saw this, he smiled and said, Tiger's Mane is right. Beta Persei, you're already 20 years old. It's time for you to find a wife. Work is important, marriage is also important, and carrying on the family line is even more important. Since Yang Qindong said this, Beta Persei could not refute. He could only lower his head and agree. However, anyone could see that he was really uncomfortable holding it in. He wanted to find a chance to learn from Tiger's Mane. They skewered the meat and started to roast it. The sky gradually darkened. Fortunately, Leng Feng had already prepared dry wood. He set them together and lit them up. As a result, a huge bonfire was formed. When the bonfire was lit, the flames burned fiercely. A sense of warmth instantly spread throughout everyone's body. Bonfire, the fragrance of meat, good wine, beautiful women, when all of this was put together, it formed a very beautiful picture. Very soon, other than Leng Feng who was on sentry duty and in charge of safety, everyone else, including Yang Qindong and his 4 wives, left the scene and gathered around the bonfire to dance and sing. Everyone's cheeks were red and all of them were beaming with joy. Hu Yan's left hand was held by Yang Qindong, and on her right was Yang Duo. Her hands were raised from time to time, and her legs were kicking and jumping. Her face was like a peach blossom, and she was extremely happy. This kind of life was something she had never dared to imagine before. It was so unrestrained, free, and even freewheeling. And it seemed that her future life could be accompanied by this. How could it not make people yearn for it and feel relaxed and happy? They did not know how long they had been dancing and singing. They drank a lot of wine, and under Dong Shuai's intentional or unintentional actions, Hu Yan was a little drunk. It was already very late. When everyone was tired, Hu Yan felt her body being lifted into the air. She was carried onto Yang Qindong's back and they entered a spacious and sturdy tent that had already been set up. Hu Yan knew that beautiful things like last night would happen again. Just when she was feeling shy, Yang Qindong had gone out and walked in again. This time, he was holding Qiao Yin in his arms. Ah! The sudden appearance of another woman made Hu Yan feel a burst of shyness and surprise. The joy of a boudoir was certainly something that people yearned for, but why did he bring another person out? Before Hu Yan could figure it out, Lady Xue and Lady Xiang were also carried into the tent by Yang Qindong. The other 3 women had already seen this kind of thing. They slept together, so of course, they knew what Dong Shuai was going to do. They were a little shy and a little excited. Hu Yan, on the other hand, was completely unaware. Just when she was wondering why there were so many people all of a sudden, a big hand began to wander around her body. That feeling made her feel comfortable and shy. She forced herself to stay awake and said, Lu Lang, don't do this. There are others, not others. They are all your sisters. Ha, let's do it together. Yang Qindong said very soberly. Under his skillful methods, Hu Yan was quickly turned into a pile of mud. Then, she was completely at his mercy. In her consciousness, she seemed to see a few white bodies. Then, she fainted happily. For a moment, the garden was filled with intoxicating spring. A ray of sunlight slowly shone through the tent and shone on Hu Yan's face. She felt the warmth and slowly opened her eyes. What came into view was that Qiao Yin and the other women were still sleeping. Ah! She could not help but exclaim. Her mind instantly recalled some of the things that happened last night. Since she was young, she had never been taught such words and thoughts in her education. For a moment, she could not believe that something like this would happen to her. Xiao Yin, Lady Shui, and Lady Xiang had already woken up. After all, it was not the first time they had done this. Their physical recovery was naturally much better than Hu Yan's. It was only because they did not know how to face it that they pretended to be asleep. However, after this scream, they could no longer pretend. They opened their eyes one by one and saw Hu Yan's tears flowing down the corners of her eyes. Hu Yan's crying made the other three women panic. They quickly came forward to comfort her and took the blame, saying that it was all their fault. No. You are not wrong. It's all his fault. I can't accept this. Hu Yan didn't want to be estranged from her sisters as soon as she came here. Although she was the official wife, she had never thought about how to rely on such an identity to bully others. Please don't blame Sir. I'm sure Big Sister doesn't know that Sir is especially good in that aspect. None of us can satisfy him. Xiao Yin hated it when people talked bad about Yang Qindong. Even if the person who spoke was Hu Yan, she was still unhappy. Yes, second sister is right. Sir is indeed very good in that aspect. It's not something we can handle alone. Lady Shui hurriedly said to Xiao Yin. Sir is working hard outside for our happiness. There are many things he needs to consider. We are just serving him. If we can't satisfy him in this aspect, then aren't we too useless? Among the women, Lady Xiang, who became Yang Qindong's woman one step ahead of Hu Yan, also expressed her attitude. They did not know when it started, or maybe it was yesterday, but they had automatically made a list. Hu Yan was Yang Qindong's first wife, so she was naturally the eldest sister. Xiao Yin had been with Yang Qindong the longest, so she was naturally the second sister. Lady Shui was the third sister, and Lady Xiang was the fourth sister. As for whether there would be a fifth sister after that, it was already set in stone. Xiao Yin had said that there was a girl named Luan Xiaoyu in their hometown who also liked Yang Qindong very much. Yang Qindong also liked her, but because she was too young, they still had to wait. If there was a fifth sister, then who knew if there would be a sixth sister and a seventh sister. However, seeing that Yang Qindong was so young and had such a big family business, it was not surprising that there would be sisters joining him. Hu Yan didn't expect that she would immediately be met with the common resistance of her three younger sisters when she said Yang Qindong's fault in a fit of pique. She quickly changed her words and said, I don't mean to blame him. It's because things came too suddenly, and I can't accept it, so, it's normal that you can't accept it. I don't blame Big Sister for having such thoughts. However, from now on, we sisters will not forgive anyone who says anything bad about Sir. Especially Big Sister. You must set an example for us. Xiao Yin said this with a rare serious expression. In her heart, Yang Qindong was the sky, the earth, and her everything. Chapter 169. Oh, I got it. Hu Yan, who had clearly suffered a loss, was now like a child who had done something wrong. She lowered her head and pursed her lips. However, it had to be said that after such a conversation, she had diluted the matter of sleeping together. She, who had been persuaded, had also begun to consider Yang Qindong. At the foot of Chicken Crow Mountain, Yang Qindong had just returned from his morning run when he was stopped by seventh sister, Yang Duo. What's the matter, seventh sister? Did someone bully you? Yang Qindong pretended to be angry when he saw the anger in Yang Duo's eyes. Her eyes weren't eyes, and her nose wasn't nose. But in reality, he knew very well what seventh sister was here for and what she wanted to say. Sixth brother, aren't you going too far? I heard that last night you. What happened last night? Did seventh sister not rest well? If so, go back and have a good rest now. If you want to go back to the Yang family village, I can send someone to send you back now. As for other things, let's not talk about them. Yang Qindong saw that the other party was bluntly talking about what happened last night and seemed to want to interfere in his family matters. Yang Qindong used words to block her. In the end, he still had to rely on himself to live his own life. As for other people's opinions, it was just a one-sided opinion and did not represent anything. Perhaps Yang Qindong was very easy to talk to when it did not involve matters of principle. However, when it came to some matters, his words carried enormous weight. Once he made a decision, he would not change it. Yang Qindong's tone suddenly became a little stiff. Yang Duo could not accept it for a moment. This sixth brother, you've changed? It's not that I've changed. It's just that seventh sister has never seriously understood me. Yang Qindong shook his head and looked at Yang Duo very seriously. They were family and had a blood relationship, so he would not watch anyone bully his seventh sister. However, this was not a reason for the other party to interfere in his life. With just one sentence, Yang Duo suddenly became speechless. Yes, she really did not understand Yang Qindong. Ever since her youngest brother had appeared in the capital, she had always been surprised by his appearance. Some matters seemed reckless, but they ended with a cause and effect. Some matters seemed unsolvable, but as long as sixth brother made a move, he would always be able to grasp the crux of the matter, and solve it in one step. As a woman, she was only judging from her own point of view. But was her point of view really correct? Even Hu Yan, as the mistress of the house, did not express any doubts. What reason and authority did he have to say anything? I'm sorry, sixth brother. I'm thinking too much. I think I should go back to the tent and have a good rest. Yang Duo suddenly felt that her behavior was a bit reckless. For a moment, she wanted to find a quiet place to think about it. After saying this, Yang Duo turned around and left. This time, Yang Qindong didn't stop him. He knew that there were some things that he had to figure out himself. Seventh sister, who had already experienced a failed marriage, was most afraid of being hurt in this aspect. Speaking of which, she reminded her out of kindness. However, Yang Duo forgot one thing. Yang Qindong was not Wang Go. After Yang Duo left, Yang Qindong strode back into the tent. After what had happened to seventh sister, he was even prepared to be scolded by Hu Yan. This was his woman, and he should love her. No matter what Hu Yan said, he was prepared to not talk back. When he entered the tent, Xiao Yin and the other two girls had already left. Only the maid Xiao Qing was there to dress Hu Yan. When she saw Yang Qindong enter, Xiao Qing quickly bowed and said, Master. And, how about this? You can leave for a moment. I have something to discuss with Madam. Yang Qindong smiled and nodded to Xiao Qing. Xiao Qing naturally knew that she would spend the rest of her life with Hu Yan and Yang Qindong. How could she dare to refuse such a small request? She agreed and immediately left. When only the two of them were left in the tent, Hu Yan lowered her head with a blush. Hu Yan was shy. After all, she and her three sisters served Yang Qindong last night. It was a shameful thing. She couldn't adapt for a while and couldn't face it. However, when Yang Qindong saw this scene, he thought that she was angry at him. He hurriedly squatted down and said, Yan, it's my fault. I didn't consider your feelings. I was too agitated, so, no. His mouth was suddenly blocked by Hu Yan's small hand. Lulang, don't say that. As your wife, I didn't consider your feelings. Last night, I was willing. The more she spoke, the lower her head. In the end, her head was about to plunge into Yang Qindong's arms. He didn't expect such a result. For a moment, Yang Qindong was overjoyed. Really? Yan, you're the best. I love you so much. In ancient times, the word love was not so easily spoken. Even when husband and wife spoke words of love, they rarely used the word love. However, when Yang Qindong said the word love, Hu Yan was overjoyed. She felt that she had made the right decision by listening to Qiao Yin and the others. In her happiness, she said happily, Lu Lang, I didn't understand you before. You were too tired. As your wife, as long as you're happy, you can do whatever you want in the future. Ha! Yang Qindong had already thought it through. It must be Qiao Yin and the others who did Hu Yan's work that resulted in such a delicious result. He was instantly even more satisfied with Qiao Yin and the others. Originally, he had to spend a lot of effort to persuade them. Unexpectedly, he didn't need to say anything and the matter was resolved. In his happiness, Yang Qindong held Hu Yan's little face and kissed it. With this kiss, Hu Yan felt her entire body go soft. She said shyly and carefully, Husband, if you want to, can you wait until night time? After all, it's broad daylight. If others find out, I'm afraid it won't be good. Ha ha ha. Seeing that Hu Yan seemed to be a little moved, Yang Qindong laughed. However, he also knew that Hu Yan's skin was probably very thin. At least, it wasn't as thick as his. If he didn't let go of this matter, it was very likely that it would cause resentment. Therefore, he intentionally changed the topic. First, he talked about the matter between Shaoqing and Sun Chuang. They're not young anymore. As their master, you should find a time to arrange their marriage. We'll take care of all the expenses. In short, you can't treat Shaoqing unfairly. After all, she's been with you for so many years, hasn't she? Thank you, sixth young master. Seeing that Yang Qindong had considered the matter so carefully, Hu Yan was very moved and said, We're husbands. In the future, there's no need to say thanks. Everything I do for you is what I should do. By the way, my seventh sister seems to have some complaints about what happened last night. Do you think you should personally go and have a good talk with her? I don't want her to misunderstand me, hee hee. Yang Qindong thought about it and decided to leave the job of persuading seventh sister to Hu Yan. If Hu Yan took the initiative to persuade her, it would be more effective than 100 words from him. Hearing that seventh sister had complaints, Hu Yan's heart was moved. This was seventh sister standing up for her. She didn't even hesitate to blame her own brother. This sister-in-law was absolutely competent. Hu Yan agreed, and Yang Qindong's heart was completely relieved. Although there were some things that he didn't ask others to understand, they were still family, and understanding was always better than opposing. Just as Yang Qindong was enjoying the happiness of having multiple wives and gaining the understanding of his wife, several groups of fast horses were galloping through the streets of the capital. These brave soldiers had banners with the word Xian written on their backs. As soon as they entered the capital, their faces were gloomy as they spurred their horses forward. Many scheming people had a bad premonition when the messenger didn't shout the news of victory from 600 miles away. This should be a battle report from the front line. If it wasn't a victory report, what could it be? At this time, in the imperial court, Zhu Qiyu had already changed into a dragon robe and was sitting on a huge golden dragon throne. He was looking at the officials and listening to them report on the important matters of the court. Zhu Qiyu, who had been emperor for some time, had gradually come to like this feeling of being high and mighty. Although he didn't have complete power and had the final say, he had basically controlled the situation. Out of the 6 ministries, 2 of the ministers had been replaced by his favored candidates, Minister of Revenue Jin Lian and Minister of War Yi Ming. These 2 had replaced Wang Zhua and Kuang Yi, who had followed Emperor Ying to Nanjing. These 2 new ministers were very grateful to Zhu Qiyu for his favor. Naturally, if this substitute emperor had any requests, they would do their best to satisfy them. Of the 6 ministries, the Minister of Works, Shi Pu, had always been a fence-sitter. When Wang Zhen had been present, he had often tried to curry favor with him. Now that Jining had become a head eunuch, he had long since leaned over. In this way, he could also be considered a member of the substitute emperor's faction. Out of the 6 divisions, 3 of them were on her side. Zhu Qiyu felt even more satisfied. Zhu Qiyu had come to court in a happy mood, intending to show off his skills and compete with Zhu Qizhen in governing the country. However, all of this ambition was shattered when a messenger ran into the imperial court to deliver an urgent military report. Report, important military intelligence from the front line. As soon as the messenger entered the main hall, he knelt on the ground with a thud. It could be seen that he had been running non-stop all this time, so much so that he was a little exhausted. Speak. Hearing that it was a military report from the front line, Zhu Qiyu straightened his body and looked at the soldier with a face full of expectation. Your Majesty, Admiral Shi Heng was ambushed by Walla's army. The army suffered heavy losses, but Admiral broke out of the encirclement and is resisting the enemy cavalry's advance. Please let me report this to your Majesty first and ask for reinforcements to be sent. Prepare for a big battle. After the messenger finished speaking in one breath, he felt his vision blur and then fainted from exhaustion. Chapter 170. Quickly, carry him away and treat him. Jining stood at Zhu Qiyu's side, looking at the unconscious soldiers as she spoke to the Huban soldiers outside the imperial court. After saying this, she felt a shadow flicker at her side. Who else could it be but Dai Zong? Just as Zhu Qiyu was about to show off his skills and become a famous monarch to unify the world, he suddenly heard that the front line had been defeated. At this moment, how could he still remain calm? His expression changed greatly, so much so that his body became a little shaky. Dear ministers, how many troops can we mobilize now? Zhu Qiyu forced himself to stay alert upon hearing this report, and he turned his eyes to the new Minister of War, Yi Ming, hoping that he could give a satisfactory result. Yi Ming, courtesy name Zixin, was the son of Yizhi, a man of high intelligence. After ascending the throne, Dai Zong had sought the favor of the Minister of Rights and was promoted to Minister of War. He was an official who had been promoted on the front lines. When he first arrived at the Bureau of Military Personnel, his seniority was still shallow, so he did not have complete control over the Bureau of Military Personnel. Now that a problem had arisen, Ming felt his head ache. But Yi Ming was still a capable person, and he quickly calmed down. After some thought, he went to the Bureau of Military Personnel and looked at the reports from the various factions and calculated a result. Your Majesty, there are currently only 5,000 soldiers in the capital. If we continue to urgently mobilize them, we should be able to mobilize another 5,000 soldiers in 3 days. In half a month, we should be able to gather an army of 50,000 soldiers. For the mighty capital of the great Ming dynasty to have so few soldiers was a result that Zhu Qiyu had not expected. But he knew that since Yi Ming dared to say this, there was no doubt about this result. If this was really the case, how should they deal with the arrival of the Walla's army? Speaking of which, there were many reasons for the current situation in the capital. Unlike in history, after the Tumu fortress incident, Dai Zong had listened to Yu Qian's words and adopted a defensive strategy. This had led to the defense of the capital and the defeat of the Walla's army. Because of Yang Qindong's arrival, Yu Qian had been invited to Tsuxian city long ago to serve him. With the idea gone, Shi Heng took command of the army and sent out the majority of the soldiers in and around the capital. Moreover, Zhu Qizhen had declared himself emperor in Nanjing and taken away a portion of his soldiers, leaving the capital suddenly empty of soldiers. Naturally, they were helpless against Walla's army. At this moment, not only Zhu Qiyu, but the other officials were also staring at each other, unable to find a better idea. As the saying goes, even the cleverest housewife cannot cook without rice. Without sufficient military strength, how can one fight a war? Can one rely on words? If they could win with their mouths, there would be no need for the country to support a large number of troops. Among the ministers, Su Yozhen's eyes kept darting around. Relying on his relationship with Yang Qindong, he was promoted again. He was no longer a part of the imperial censor, but went to Taichung Temple to become a Shaoqing. He was in charge of the country's sacrificial ceremonies and was a fourth-grade official. The reason why he was promoted so quickly was naturally because Yang Qindong had helped him with a lot of money. It was also because the original Shaoqing of Taichung Temple, Huang Yangzheng, went to Nanjing with Yingzong, so there was a vacancy. As a fourth-grade official, Su Yozhen already had a stage to display his ambitions. At this moment, when he saw the emperor and the other ministers' difficult expressions, he really wanted to stand up and propose to move the capital to the south. After all, a gentleman would not stand under a dangerous wall. In fact, in history, Su Yozhen was the main official who proposed this idea. But now, this idea just flashed in his mind. It was not for anything else, but because Ingzong had already gone to Nanjing. At this time, what would they mean by going there? It was likely that an internal conflict would be inevitable. And Zhu Qiyu, who was leading the defeated army, really did not know what the chances of winning were. Unable to bring up the matter of moving the capital to the south, Su Yozhen's eyes darted around as he thought of another feasible idea. At this moment, when the other ministers were still thinking about what to do, he had already taken out his ceremonial tablet. He stepped forward and said, "I have something to report." "Minister Su, quickly say it." Seeing that everyone had no idea, but one minister still had a suggestion, Zhu Qiyu suddenly had a feeling of hope. "Your Majesty, the army at the front has suddenly lost, and the capital is in danger. At this time, the first thing to do is to mobilize the troops near the capital to save the emperor. The second thing to do is to choose a general who can lead the army to block the enemy outside the city wall. This will ensure the stability of the great Ming dynasty." "That's right, mobilizing the troops after, choosing the general before." Zhu Qiyu felt that it was very reasonable. He immediately said to the Minister of War, "Ming, Minister Yi, you can send a letter to mobilize the troops near the capital to protect the capital." "Yes, Your Majesty." Yi Ming replied and then left the court with his ceremonial tablet. "Good, now everyone, who can lead the army to fight against the Walla army?" Zhu Qiyu's eyes swept across the ministers in the court. The desire in his eyes was very obvious. However, when he asked this question, the entire court fell silent. First, the Tumu Fort's army of 500,000 suffered a crushing defeat, and then General Shi Hang's army of 150,000 was also defeated. Right now, there were only a few thousand men left in the imperial court. Even if they waited for 3 days, their military strength would still be no more than 10,000. How could they resist the elite Walla cavalry? The Walla cavalry could defeat the great Ming army again and again. At this moment, the ministers' faces changed at the mention of this tiger. The crowd of officials didn't speak. This made Zhu Qiyu extremely anxious. "What's wrong? Our magnificent great Ming dynasty actually has a great general who can command the 3 armies?" Valuing the civil and despising the military had always been the basic national policy of the Ming dynasty. In fact, it was not only the Ming dynasty. It was the same from the earliest Han dynasty to the Tang dynasty and the Song dynasty. After all, the military was strong and the civil was weak, which was not good for the stability of the country. In the Ming dynasty, this situation was even more obvious. Normally, when the military met the civil officials, it was very rare for the military to be able to straighten their backs. It was just like Shi Sheng in the past. However, a Qianhu of the Brocade Guard could bully a famous general, Zhang Fu, and invade his land. It was no wonder that when Zhu Qiyu asked this question, the civil officials and the military officials did not speak. Is there really no brave general who dares to face the Walla army? Zhu Qiyu asked loudly in anger. At this moment, he really wanted to roar, "If none of you go, do you want us to personally lead the army?" However, when he thought of his elder brother Zhu Qizhen's end, this thought quickly disappeared without a trace. He did not want to be the second emperor who lost an army. What if he was captured by the enemy when the time came? What should he do? Zhu Qiyu's face was full of anger. He criticized the officials that he usually raised for being useless. Jining saw that the situation in the court had worsened and reminded him in a low voice, "Your Majesty, this matter needs to be discussed at length. It is better to dismiss the court first and wait until tomorrow morning to make a decision." The courtiers were not completely loyal to him. The most important thing was that there was still Zhu Qizhen in Nanjing for everyone to rely on. Even if he really got angry here, not only would it be useless, it was likely to lead to a backlash from the courtiers. If they collectively left, then his position as the emperor would come to an end. Forget it, forget it. Everyone, go back and think about it carefully. Wait until tomorrow morning. No matter what, you must choose a candidate. Dismiss the court. Zhu Qiyu was very helpless. Although he had become the emperor, this emperor did not seem to be as powerful as the previous Ming dynasty emperors. After the officials shouted "Long live the emperor," they left the court and left the palace. After Su Yozhen left the palace hall, she quickly contacted the people of the security bureau and reported the situation in the court today. At this time, Yang Qindong had already returned to the Yang family manor from the foot of Ji Ming Mountain with the women. Originally, the women wanted to play for a few more days, but tomorrow was the time for Hu Yan to return home. This was an important matter for the first madam, so Yang Qindong naturally had to take care of it. He returned to the Yang family manor in advance to make preparations. On the way back, the people of the security bureau came over and reported everything that happened in the court. The group had stopped. Yang Qindong stood on the side of the road and listened to the report of the staff of the security bureau. In the carriage, Xiao Yin looked at this scene through the curtain and couldn't help but say, "Sir is busy with important matters again. Unfortunately, we can't help much. The only thing we can do is to make him happy when he sees us. Don't make him angry and satisfy all his requests." "You're right, second sister." Lady Xue and Lady Xiang hurriedly agreed. Looking at Hu Yan, although she didn't say anything at this time, from her concerned eyes, it could be seen that she had accepted the fact that she slept with him. Even if the other women could understand Yang Qindong, as the wife, why couldn't she understand? On the side of the road, after carefully listening to what happened in the court, Yang Qindong sighed. Although the wheel of history had changed because of his appearance, the defense of the capital still had to start as scheduled. Since history had changed, Yang Qindong couldn't accurately predict what would happen, and naturally couldn't make plans in advance. But since the emperor asked to recommend a general to lead the army, he was somewhat interested. First, this was a good opportunity for him to show his talent. Second, it was a good opportunity to consolidate his strength and expand his influence. Third, and most importantly, Yang Qindong would never allow the other races to have any ideas about the Han people and cause any destruction. Back then, Guang Yi and Wang Zhe, the two ministers of the 6 ministries, wrote to him, saying that he had saved Ingzong's life, and that he would have more room to develop in Nanjing than in the capital. The environment would also be better. But Yang Qindong still refused. That was because there was a strong enemy in the capital, Walla, while Nanjing was very safe. Chapter 171. It couldn't be said that Yang Qindong had appeared for the sake of war, but he had indeed appeared for the sake of the Han's rise to power. Since there were people who wanted to harm the Han, why couldn't he teach them a lesson? Presumably, after this battle, Zhu Qiyu would owe him a big favor. This would only be beneficial to his future plans. Alright, Marquis knows about this matter. How about this, go back and tell Su Yozhen to recommend Marquis to lead the army tomorrow morning. Yang Qindong analyzed the situation and felt that the time was right. It was time to step forward, so he informed his subordinates of his decision. Yes. The staff member of the security bureau quickly left after receiving a confirmation. Yang Qindong quickly returned to the spacious carriage. As soon as he entered, the women began to chatter incessantly. Knowing that there were some things that couldn't be hidden, Yang Qindong maintained a smile on his face as he said, "The soldiers on the front lines have been defeated. The Walla army should be arriving at the capital soon." Ah! The women had only asked out of curiosity. Even if Yang Qindong hadn't said anything, they would have understood. After all, the idea of a male protagonist had been passed down for thousands of years. But unexpectedly, Yang Qindong didn't have any intention of hiding it from them. He really did tell them about it, but the result was so shocking. They're about to reach the capital. Then we As a descendant of the Hu clan, Hu Yan was naturally more sensitive to political matters than the other women. You don't need to worry. With sixth brother here, no one in this world can harm you. You just need to properly stay in the Yang clan manner. Yang Qindong spoke with an incomparably resolute voice. At this moment, Yang Qindong was so confident that the four women were mesmerized and unable to extricate themselves. Sensing that the four women weren't panicking anymore, Yang Qindong smiled and said, "All right, let's do what we need to do now. The immortal abode and realm beyond heaven need to operate normally to calm the people. If possible, if there's a property market nearby that's willing to sell at a suitable price, we can buy it. It's also time to expand our operations." To ordinary people, war was naturally a disaster. But to some people, it was filled with countless business opportunities. Everything depended on your position, what kind of information you could obtain, and what kind of authority you held. Yang Qindong didn't lack any of these three things. If he couldn't maximize his benefits in this situation, then all his previous preparations and plans would be meaningless. Buy. This was the first order Yang Qindong gave to Hu Yan and the others, as well as the first mission of his wives. For the sake of making the best of the situation, a total of 5 million taels of silver had been moved out of the cellar of the Yang clan manor. This was all prepared by Yang Qindong before the construction of the Ethwood fortress. It was all for the sake of dealing with the current situation. Tell Leng Song to pick up the pace. Be more daring. We have to reach the capital within 5 days. Yang Qindong looked at Leng Feng and his brothers, who were carrying so much silver that their hands were about to go limp. Even though he was giving orders to Tiger's Mane, he was thinking of another problem. If moving silver was so troublesome, it seemed like it was time to consider the issue of banknotes. The appearance of banknotes was a huge step forward in the history of currency. Some people in the world of currency believed that the origin of banknotes in China could be traced back to the white deer skin coin of Emperor Wu's time and the flying money of the Tang dynasty. The flying money was actually just a currency exchange business. It did not enter into circulation and did not function as a currency, so it was not a true banknote. The banknotes of Sichuan and Chengdu during the Northern Song dynasty were the beginning of the true banknotes. But for various reasons, the system was not perfect, and in the end, it was not developed on a large scale. In the Yuan dynasty and Ming dynasty, although the banknote system was further improved, it was still difficult for it to be accepted by the people. At the end of the Qing dynasty, the Qing dynasty's economy was in trouble, and the treasury was empty. In order to raise money for the military, they had to change their original plan of not printing banknotes for 200 years. In the third year of Xianfeng, 1853, the first banknote of the Ministry of Revenue was printed. This time, the banknotes of the Ministry of Revenue were divided into 5 types of silver: 1 tael, 3 taels, 5 taels, 10 taels, and 50 taels. In the middle of the banknotes were written in both Manchu and Chinese characters, Ministry of Revenue official banknote. It was from then on that banknotes became one of the paper currencies that could be circulated. Although the Ming dynasty also had official banknotes, most of them were internal transactions between officials. Ordinary people and even merchants rarely participated in them. The imperfection of the system meant that these banknotes could be turned into waste paper at any time. Who would dare to use silver to exchange for them? Not to mention other people, but even Yang Qindong himself did not trust the Ming dynasty government. This government was made up of officials, and the speed at which it changed was so fast that it made one's eyes blur. Who would dare to take out all of their wealth to exchange for banknotes? Perhaps the moment one exchanged for it, the Genie guards and the East faction guards would come to raid one's home. For example, Yang Qindong's 5 million taels of silver had never been exposed. He believed that if he really trusted the great Ming dynasty, Wang Zhen would have already made a move on him and would not have waited until it had developed to such a scale. It was because the banknote system was not recognized by many that Yang Qindong wanted to do something about it. In his later life, he had seen the power of the state-owned banks, so he could naturally see the huge benefits involved. As for the risks, with the Yang Xie's new army as his backing, he was not afraid of others plotting against him. Perhaps he was still thinking that if others had such thoughts, he would have a good reason to deal with them. While Yang Qindong was still thinking about his grand plans, the capital was already in chaos. As the officials returned home from the court, the news of the Ming dynasty's defeat spread like wildfire. For a time, all sorts of things were said, and in a state of panic, a small number of people left the capital and headed south. Although there were not many of them, most of them were merchants. They had all left in fear after hearing that the Ming dynasty's army was defeated and that the Walla was about to arrive at the capital. When these people left, most of them took with them a large amount of cash from their homes. Perhaps it was said that merchants valued profits, and patriotism was not as reliable as profits. The departure of a portion of merchants caused the already tense atmosphere in the capital to become even more chaotic. Even some of the common people began to pack up. After 2 consecutive defeats and the loss of the Ming dynasty's elites, they did not have much confidence that they could defeat the Walla. If they did not leave, they would most likely meet with misfortune. Not to mention, in the afternoon of that day, there was a rumor that the Walla cavalry drank human blood and ate human flesh to survive. Once captured, the women would naturally be humiliated, and the men and children would become food in their mouths. This news was far more effective than people saying that the Walla cavalry was brave and good in battle. The direct result was that a large number of people gathered at the city gate. If it was not for the city gate being closed at the time, who knew how many people would have left? The so-called news of the Walla eating humans was naturally released by the Security Bureau in order to attract big hoodlums and fish in troubled waters. However, this action seemed to be a little too big. At that time, the common people were not well informed and their knowledge was limited. Thus, they really believed the rumors, and in a short period of time, a wave of people left the city. The situation at the city gate quickly spread to the palace and into the ears of the acting patriarch, Zhu Qiyu. When he heard that his people were so panicked, the new emperor was scared out of his wits. If the capital became an empty city, how could it resist the Walla army? Could it be that he, the new emperor, was going to abandon the city and flee? If that was the case, where could he go? Zhu Qizhan of the Ying sect was probably waiting for him to make a fool of himself. Go and find out who spread the rumors. After we catch them, we will cut them into pieces. Zhu Qiyu's eyes seemed to spit fire as he spoke. Your Majesty, the embroidered uniform guards and the Eastern Depot will naturally investigate this matter. However, what is more important is how to pacify the people in the city. If these people really do leave the capital, then... Jining, who had been urgently summoned, did not elaborate on what would happen. But one could imagine that if the capital became empty, the emperor would truly be a loner. In that case, this emperor would have undoubtedly failed. No. We can't let them leave. Beloved subject, do you have a good plan? Zhu Qiyu naturally understood the severity of the situation if things continued to develop like this, so he urgently asked Jining if he had any good ideas. Your Majesty, this subject is incompetent and does not have a better plan for now. However, in order to prevent the situation from spiraling out of control, this subject suggests that we temporarily close the city gates and allow only small towns to enter and exit. Moreover, we must conduct inspections and forbid the common people from taking money out of the city. In this way, the family property will naturally remain here and will not leave. As for how to deal with the Walla's soldiers, Your Majesty must preside over tomorrow's morning court and discuss with the other officials a plan. Jining had never seen anything like this before. Although he had followed several emperors and seen their ability to govern, this was mostly a power struggle between the emperor and the court officials. This was the first time he had ever seen an army pressing down on the capital. Zhu Qiyu was somewhat panicked, but he felt that Jin Ying's words were somewhat reasonable. He immediately agreed and placed all his hopes on tomorrow's morning court. After a sleepless night, the morning court began as scheduled. At the same time, the main gates of the capital were opened to side gates in the name of preventing Walla spies from sneaking in. Strict inspections were also carried out, and if anyone was found to be leaving the capital with large amounts of money, they would be arrested on the spot for all sorts of unnecessary crimes. Although this method was somewhat forceful, it truly did prevent the common people from leaving the capital. Chapter 172. It was under such a tense atmosphere that Yang Qindong entered the capital from the Yang family manor. It was the day of the return trip. He came to the Hu mansion with his new wife, Hu Yan, to visit his relatives. The inspection for leaving the city was very strict, but for entering the city, it was much more relaxed. This point was tantamount to slapping himself in the face, proving how ridiculous the so-called catching spies was. Since Yang Qindong became marquis, the lineup when he went out had become much larger. It was the same this time. The number of servants and guards alone had reached 30, and there were nearly 100 strong men and maids carrying boxes. From this point of view, Yang Qindong had already violated the rules. According to the law of the Great Ming Dynasty, a marquis could only take 8 attendants at most when he went out, but he had 30 guards. Even if he took more than 100 strong men and maids with him, the team was indeed too large. If it was in normal times, those imperial censors would probably impeach him again. But now, the capital was in danger. Who was in the mood to worry about this? Of course, even in peacetime, Yang Qindong would not change what he had decided. He came to create rules, not to follow them. Besides, in order to marry Hu Yan, Yang Qindong had given Hu family at least 2 million things, which had once shocked the capital. But in the end, those were filial gifts from Yang Qindong, but this time, Hu Yan was filial to her parents. The meaning was naturally different. Of course, Hu Yan would feel proud and happy that so many good things were given to her family. But after all, she was already a member of the Yang family. Out of consideration for her husband, she still said the words of refusal. In this regard, Yang Qindong reached out to scratch her nose and said with a smile, "Silly girl, you are my woman now. So what if I give you some things? Besides, your 6th son has nothing but a lot of money. Don't worry. After these things are given out, your 6th son will not become poor." This little joke made Hu Yan inexplicably happy, and her nose was a little sore. Although money might not be able to prove anything, wouldn't taking care of his face and being forthright and magnanimous prove his importance? Thinking of this, she sighed that she had married the right person and chosen the right man. The vast army entered the capital. If it were any other time, such a scene would definitely attract a lot of onlookers, and even a lot of discussions and gossip. At the same time, it would also garner a lot of envious gazes. But at this time, everyone was thinking about how to leave the capital to take refuge. Who would have the time to care about such trivial matters and watch such a show? Seated in the spacious and luxurious carriage, Yang Qindong would occasionally look out the window, gathering all the information in his mind and gaining a more direct understanding of the situation in the capital. Hu Yan nestled in Yang Qindong's arms. It was rare that there was no one else in the carriage, so she became somewhat unrestrained. She completely disregarded her reserved appearance and leaned her head against Yang Qindong's chest, feeling the strong and powerful heartbeat with a face full of happiness. When the carriage stopped in front of the Hu estate and Hu Yan got off, her face was still flushed with happiness. When she saw her mother waiting in the hall, she excitedly ran over. In the imperial court, the atmosphere today was exceptionally tense. In the past, in order to express his majesty, the emperor would first listen to the memorials of his subordinates, and then give a few suggestions when he had an idea, demonstrating his supreme authority. But today, before the officials could speak, even after they had just knelt down and chanted, "Long live the emperor," he asked anxiously, "Dear officials, do you have any ideas about the candidate to lead the army and the strategy to retreat the enemy? Do you all have any ideas?" Thus, the entire court fell silent. If one were to say that a great Confucian scholar who knew the 4 books and 5 classics, he could naturally name many people. But when it came to driving back the enemy and leading the army, how could it be so easy? Speaking of which, it had been a long time since there had been a major foreign war. Even if there were some wars, they were only small skirmishes or internal conflicts. For those kinds of battles, as long as the enemy was pressured, there was no need for any techniques. But this time, facing the elite cavalry of Walla who had repeatedly defeated them, hundreds of thousands of troops were thrown in twice, and the result was a great defeat, which led to a situation where there was a shortage of soldiers. So, how could they resist the enemy? Not to mention that recommending a candidate to be an official and a general were two completely different things. When recommending an official, even if the other party was not qualified, they could casually find a reason and say that they did not know the official very well to get away with it. At most, they could bribe the officials and use some money, and the matter would be resolved as a small matter. But recommending a general to fight against the powerful army of Walla, if they did not do well, they would lose their heads, and even worse, the recommender would also be punished. So, who would do such a recommendation easily? On one hand, they did not want to cause trouble, but more importantly, they did not have a suitable candidate in mind. In their eyes, the Tile army that even Ingzong himself could not defeat was already an undefeatable army, an army that no one could defeat. The officials were all mute and did not make a sound. This made the emperor anxious, and Zhu Qiyu angry. What? You don't even have a suitable candidate. You claim to be the pillars of the country, and according to you, you have everything in the world in your hands, and you are omnipotent, but now, is it so difficult to recommend a person to lead the army? Ah! If that's the case, are you lying to me? In anger, Zhu Qiyu wanted to label the officials as deceiving the emperor. In this way, even if he used this reason to kill a few officials, the others would not be able to say anything. Feeling the anger of the emperor, the officials were panicking, and at the same time, they looked at each other, and then quickly transitioned in their minds to a candidate to lead the army. But no matter how hard they thought, it was difficult to find a suitable person. What? Seeing that the officials still did not say a word, in anger, Zhu Qiyu decided to kill a few people as a sacrifice to the flag. Some people were like this. If they were not forced to this point, they would not know how powerful they were. Just as Zhu Qizhen's gaze swept over and was thinking about who to kill to make an example, someone in the crowd suddenly said, "Emperor, this official has a candidate to recommend." Oh. Who? Who are you recommending? Come forward. Zhu Qiyu, who was about to explode, suddenly saw hope, and was naturally very happy. His eyes searched, and his voice became very anxious. As you wish. The newly appointed vice minister of Taichung Temple, Su Yozhen, who had received the emperor's order, stepped forward with a face full of confidence. The officials were also curious about who stepped forward at this time, but when they saw that it was Su Yozhen, who was in charge of the sacrifice, they all showed a puzzled expression. This person used to be an imperial censor, although he had impeached some people, and had a slight reputation, but in the end, he was not a ranked official, and it was difficult for him to enter the eyes of others. If it were not for the two emperors this time, it would be impossible for him to be promoted from a 6th-rank official to a 4th-rank vice minister of Taichung Temple. Yesterday, this person had been in the limelight once, and at that time, his colleagues had a whole new level of respect for him. They did not expect that he would speak again today. Could it be that he really had a suitable candidate in mind to lead the army? Could it be that he was really a person with a military strategy? Under the gaze of the officials, under the eager eyes of the emperor, Su Yozhen, who was holding the ceremonial tablet, stepped forward with a face full of confidence, knelt and said, "This official recommends a person. He has fought with the Walla cavalry, and has not been defeated, and retreated unscathed. With him, the so-called small foreign tribes are not a problem, and can be swept away like a spider web in a room." Su Yozhen's flattery made the ministers in the imperial court even more surprised. Who had fought with the Walla army and not been defeated? Even Shi Heng, who was given the title of Taidu and Wuqing Count, was also defeated. Could it be that there was really a general more powerful than this person? If it was true, why hadn't they heard of it? The officials were puzzled, but the emperor, Zhu Qiyu, did not think much about it. Right now, he was anxious to find a way to solve the problem, as long as he could force the enemy to retreat. As for where he came from and what his current position was, he did not care about it. Good, good, my great Ming is really full of talents, but I don't know the name of this person. Where is he now? What is his official position? Zhu Qiyu asked anxiously, but Su Yozhen answered indifferently, replying to the emperor, this person is now in the capital, Yang Qindong, the loyal marquis. Su Shaoqing, be careful with your words. Among the officials, someone quickly made a reproachful attitude. This person was an important official in the court, the Minister of Rights, Hu Shao. Yang Qindong married his granddaughter, and the two families had a very close relationship. Now that someone recommended his grandson-in-law to lead the army to war, of course, he would be unhappy. This was war, and people would die, not doing business. At worst, it would just be a loss of money. That's right, Su Shaoqing, don't be too impatient. This is leading the army to war, a matter of national importance, not a place to settle personal grudges. Hu Zhangning also stood in the court. In order to solve the crisis, Zhu Qiyu had specially ordered all the fifth-rank officials in the capital to come to court. As the imperial guardian of the embroidered uniform guard, he naturally had the qualifications to stand here. He was already Yang Qindong's father-in-law, so he naturally could not ignore his son-in-law's matters. His words directly pointed out that there was a problem with Su Yozhen's motives. In fact, most people in the court remembered that when Su Yozhen was still an imperial censor, he had once impeached Yang Qindong for going to the red light district. After that, although Yang Qindong was unharmed, he was promoted. With this precedent as an example, it was no wonder that Hu Zhangning would think this way and even dare to point it out in front of the court. Su Yozhen, who was being rebuked by both Hu Shao and Hu Zhangning, did not panic in the slightest. On the contrary, he maintained a slight smile and said, yes, when this official was an imperial censor, I truly did impeach the loyal marquis, but that was only out of duty, not because of personal grudges. Now, this official is recommending the loyal marquis both out of duty and to repay the emperor's kindness in recognizing my worth. Moreover, this official can take responsibility for his words. If the loyal marquis is unable to stop the enemy outside the capital, this official is willing to take full responsibility. Chapter 173. Take full responsibility. When he said this, the entire court was in an uproar. This was no longer a recommendation, but a bet on his own life. If he didn't have enough confidence, how would he dare to do such a thing? For a moment, all the officials looked at each other. No one dared to doubt whether Su Yozhen had bad motives. After all, if you wanted to harm your enemy or opponent, there were many ways. But he wouldn't choose this kind of responsible statement. Wasn't that taking the initiative to jump into a sinking ship and seeking his own death? Su Yozhen's words made all the officials speechless. There was a feeling of speechlessness and they didn't know what to say. Zhu Qiyu, who saw all of this, was very happy in his heart. Regardless of whether Yang Qindong was suitable to lead the army or not, at least someone had recommended a candidate. This was a good sign. He looked at Su Yozhen with a praising gaze and said, good, Minister Su is loyal to the country, your heart is praiseworthy. But I don't know how you are so sure that the Marquis of Loyalty can take on this heavy responsibility. Your Majesty, please allow this official to report. After receiving Yang Qindong's reply yesterday, he also received a lot of information from the Security Bureau. After sorting it out, he also thought about what to say for half a night. Now that it was time to show off, he immediately boasted in front of Dai Zong and all the officials. From Su Yozhen's mouth, everyone knew that Yang Qindong saved Ding Zong, Kuang Yi, Wang Zhua, and the other 9 officials. Only then did they know that the Marquis of Loyalty didn't rely on luck, but a mercenary army with a high price. They were using the latest firearms, which were not difficult to fire continuously. Moreover, they were extremely accurate. It was because of this army of 100 people that they were able to save the lives of Ying Zong and the others in the chaos. This was the reason why they were given the title of Count of Loyalty and Courage. After explaining the situation in detail, Su Yozhen immediately kowtowed to the ground and vowed to Zhu Qizhen, "Your Majesty, this official is willing to use my life and the dozens of people in my family as a guarantee. If we can invite the Marquis of Loyalty and the mercenary army, it isn't impossible to withdraw the elite army of the Walla. This official asks for your Majesty's decree." His voice was impassioned and powerful, reverberating throughout the entire palace. Every word and sentence passed into the ears of the emperor and the officials, but at this time, no one agreed. It was obvious that everyone was digesting what Su Yozhen had said and the information she had brought to them. Zhu Qiyu also didn't immediately make a decision. Su Yozhen's words alone were not enough to determine if Yang Qindong really had such an ability. This was a battle to protect the capital. If he made a mistake, he would lose everything he had and his life. If he lost this battle and the capital fell to the enemy, even if he killed Yang Qindong and Su Yozhen, what use would it be? He needed to think about it carefully, so he fell into deep thought. Jining, who was extremely observant, saw that Zhu Qiyu hadn't spoken for a long time. She reminded him in a small voice, "Your Majesty, is it possible to withdraw from court first and discuss this matter at court tomorrow morning?" "Oh, let's end the court session." Zhu Qiyu nodded mechanically. Immediately, a drake-like voice rang out, "Court dismissed." The Hu estate. Yang Qindong had been sitting in the main hall, accompanied by the chief steward of the Hu estate. When Hu Xiao and Hu Zhangning returned, the three of them greeted each other. "Everyone else is dismissed." Hu Xiao glanced at the steward and Tiger's mane, who had been standing by Yang Qindong's side like a javelin. The steward withdrew. Tiger's mane also withdrew after receiving a signal from Yang Qindong. When only the three of them were left in the room, Hu Xiao took the initiative to speak. "Loyal Marquis, do you know that someone recommended you to lead the army in the battle against the Walla?" Hu Xiao asked directly, his sharp gaze piercing straight into Yang Qindong's heart. It was unimaginable that an old man in his 70s had so much experience in dealing with the world and pleasing countless people. Let alone a young man who wasn't even 20 years old, such a gaze would make even an old official of the same court panic. Even Hu Zhangning, who was seated next to Hu Xiao, felt a wave of pressure wash over him. However, towards this, Yang Qindong was neither anxious nor slow, and his expression was incomparably indifferent. It was as if these words were not directed at him. "Thank you for your concern, old master. Qindong is truly guilty." Calling Hu Xiao old master was not a common title at the time. This form of address caused Hu Xiao's expression to freeze. His sharp gaze and stern expression seemed to have faded a lot at this moment. Hu Xiao's aura was no longer overbearing. Yang Qindong spread out his hands and spoke with a sincere expression. "Old master, father-in-law has something to ask, so I naturally do not dare to hide it. Su Yozhen's intentions are my intentions." "What do you mean?" Yang Qindong's reply caused Hu Zhangning's expression to stiffen. He did not quite understand. On the other hand, his father, Hu Xiao, quickly understood everything. His gaze was filled with obvious surprise. "Su Yozhen is one of your people. When did this happen? Has she ever impeached you before?" "She has been one of my people since before the impeachment." Yang Qindong spoke extremely calmly, as if he was talking about something insignificant. There was not the slightest hint of pride. Controlling a rank 4 official of the imperial court was something to be proud of. However, no matter how one looked at it, he did not seem to care at all. It was as if everything was right and proper. This. Hu Zhangning finally understood. Of course, his face was filled with shock. Hu Dan was also shocked by these words. However, he had been in the imperial court for so many years after all. He quickly understood the crux of the matter. He was also incomparably shocked, but he did not show it on his face. Just by looking at his ability to maintain his composure, it was unknown how much better he was than his son. "So that's how it is. It seems that this old man has worried too much. But you arranged for Su Yozhen to do this? How confident are you?" Hu Xiao knew that Yang Qindong was playing a very big game of chess, but he did not know exactly what he was going to do. He only knew that this grandson-in-law of his was filled with confidence. I don't dare to hide it from old master. I am 100% confident, Yang Qindong respectfully replied while inwardly praising Hu Xiao's reaction and judgment. 100%. This answer also startled Hu Xiao. His eyes lit up as if he was going to reevaluate Yang Qindong at this moment. Since ancient times, no one had dared to say that they were 100% confident in war. Even if they knew that victory was certain, they would only say that they were 99% confident. This was all because reality was unpredictable and constantly changing. This was especially true when it came to war. Often, if one did not consider everything thoroughly, it could change the entire situation. Who dared to say that they were 100% confident? Yang Qindong was so sure, without the slightest bit of impetuousness. It didn't seem like he was speaking without thinking. Didn't that mean that he really had thought about it long ago and was prepared long ago? But what was he relying on? I heard that you hired an army of 100 people. Those people have firearms that our great Ming dynasty does not have. With them, you were able to successfully rescue Yingzong. Is this true? Hu Xiao began to wonder where Yang Qindong's confidence came from. The first thing he asked was what Su Yozhen said. It is true. Yang Qindong replied in a resolute tone. I did hire an army. They also have firearms that are many times more advanced than our great Ming dynasty. With them, they have no problem dealing with the Walla cavalry. But what? Hu Xiangning, who was listening intently, asked anxiously. It's just that the cost of hiring them is too high. Every time they complete a mission, it costs 10,000 taels per person. Moreover, it costs at least 1,000,000 taels per person. In other words, even if you only hire one person, you have to pay 1,000,000 taels of silver to hire them. Sigh, it's really a waste of money. Yang Qindong said while shaking his head, indicating that he could not bear the burden. So much? Hu Xiangning was also shocked by the high cost. 100 people cost 1,000,000 taels of silver. Didn't that mean that the money needed to hire 100 people could support an army of a few 100,000 people at the border for a year? Yes, it's that much. Moreover, it's impossible to negotiate the price. This is because I have done business with them before and have some credibility. If it were someone else, I'm afraid that even if they paid, they would not be able to hire them. Yang Qindong lowered his head and let out a long sigh. His expression showed that he could not bear the burden anymore. Admitting that Su Yozhen was one of his people was the sincerity that Yang Qindong showed to the Hu clan. Since they were all relatives, it would not be good to hide some things. If people knew about it in the future, how would they meet each other? But even if they were relatives, there were some things that could be said and some things that could not be said. For example, the mercenary army was originally his own army. He did not need to spend any money at all and they would completely obey his orders. Yang Qindong would not tell Hu Xiao about this. Not only that, but he also had to pretend that it was very difficult. Only in this way would the old man speak up for him at the crucial moment. It could also be said that Yang Qindong was willing to say so much to Hu Xiao because he wanted to use his mouth to persuade Zhu Qiyu and let him know that only he had the strength to reverse the situation. Only in this way could the other party come to him and he could ask for an exorbitant price. When Yang Qindong did things, he had always done things step by step. Even people like Hu Xiao would often inadvertently be used by him. By the time he reacted, he would often not know whether to laugh or cry. At lunchtime, the atmosphere seemed to have returned to normal, but Hu Ming and Hu Xiangning both seemed to have a lot on their minds. Yang Qindong, on the other hand, kept sitting there with a modest smile, which made Hu Yen glare at him fiercely, but then her eyes became incomparably warm. Hu Yen did not know what Yang Qindong said to her grandfather and father, but she was sure of one thing, and that was that he would definitely not harm her family. Chapter 174. This time, Hu Yan brought back so many good things. Compared to the other married sisters, her face was full of glory, and she received many envious gazes from the crowd. And all of this was brought to her by Yang Qindong. How could she be dissatisfied? After a seemingly quiet lunch, Hu Yan bid farewell to her parents and family and left the Hu estate with Yang Qindong. After watching them leave, Hu Zhangning asked eagerly, "Father, can I send someone to investigate him?" The governor of the brocade guard originally had the power to investigate cases. This time, he planned to use his power to understand his son-in-law. "You can't. Zhangning, remember this. Although he is not as old as you, he is meticulous, farsighted, and farsighted. Even I can't compare to him. If you want to do anything, you won't be able to hide from him. If you do this, it will only hurt the relationship between the two of you. It is meaningless." Hu Chang shook his head and gave a high evaluation of Yang Qindong. Hu Zhangning didn't expect his father to think so highly of Yang Qindong. Although he was a little unconvinced, he was used to listening to his father's orders for a long time. This made him immediately dispel the idea of doing anything. "Okay, I won't do anything. But father, how will I explain this to the emperor in the morning court tomorrow?" "This. Father will have to think about it carefully." The news came too suddenly. It was so sudden that Hu Chang couldn't completely digest it, let alone think of a way to deal with it. Imperial Palace. When Zhu Qiyu saw Jining appear in front of him, he immediately ignored his status as the emperor and got up. He asked anxiously, "How is it? Did you find out anything?" "Replying to your majesty, this subject has sent out a lot of spies and obtained proof that the loyal marquis really has a very elite army by his side. In order to avoid alerting the enemy and to avoid causing a misunderstanding between the two sides, our people did not come into close contact with them and did not see what the new firearms looked like. However, there is one thing that can be confirmed, and that is the existence of new firearms. This has been confirmed through some of the things that have happened." Jining wiped the sweat from his forehead as he answered Zhu Qiyu's question. He gave off the feeling that he had worked very hard to obtain this information in such a short time. But in reality, he had already experienced the new firearms before, so he naturally knew that everything was true. Hearing that there was indeed a new type of firearm, Zhu Qiyu saw a glimmer of hope. "That's impossible. What if we make it ourselves? If it's really as powerful as you say, with such firearms, why should we be afraid of others?" Human nature was greedy. After knowing the benefits of the new firearms, Zhu Qiyu started to have ideas about it. Perhaps it was because of his identity as the emperor that he had the misconception that everything under the heavens belonged to the emperor, and that all the good things under the heavens should belong to him. Jining had thought of this before, and she had paid a heavy price for it. She naturally knew that this path would not work. Faced with Zhu Qiyu's wishful thinking, she could only say, "Your Majesty, I'm afraid this won't be easy." "What do you mean?" Hearing that the matter was impossible, displeasure appeared on Zhu Qiyu's face. Jining was stared at by that stern gaze and her entire body tensed. She knew that if she did not explain the matter clearly, she was afraid that the emperor would hold a grudge against her. If she was not careful, he might even replace her and find someone more obedient to take power. Eunuchs were close officials of the emperor. Naturally, they enjoyed the benefits of being in a favorable position. This was also the main reason why they could become powerful and even have real power. At the same time, eunuchs relied on the emperor's favor. Once they lost this support, they were nothing. They would be chewed up by those officials in an instant and not even a scrap of bone would be left. Jining was well aware of the reasoning behind this. How could she dare to make Zhu Qiyu unhappy? Seeing the emperor's dissatisfied expression, she hurriedly explained, "Your Majesty, think about it. Those mercenaries saved Ding Zong's life on the battlefield. How could he not see the value of these people? However, they were not used by him. This shows that this matter is difficult to accomplish. As for how the Marquis of Loyalty and Courage used to convince those people, I'm afraid that we will need to investigate to find out. Jining had no choice but to bring up Ingzong. Perhaps in the eyes of this new emperor, only his former imperial brother could give him some pressure. As expected. Hearing Jin Ying's explanation, Zhu Qiyu's expression became much more normal. Something that even his imperial brother could not do, it seemed normal that he could not do it. The new firearms were not easy to obtain, and the mercenaries would definitely not listen to him. Zhu Qiyu had no choice but to set his sights on Yang Qindong. He had long heard of this gifted scholar, Yang Qindong, who he had even conferred the title of the Marquis of Loyalty and Courage, attracted Zhu Qiyu's attention. Beloved official, what do you think of the Marquis of Loyalty and Courage? Hearing the emperor's thoughts change so quickly, Jining was startled at first, but quickly recovered. Your Majesty, the Marquis of Loyalty and Courage is very talented. He also has the ability to earn money. He is a rare talent. However, how is his ability to command troops? This subject does not know. Jining had already encountered Yang Qindong more than once. Although the two of them hadn't interacted much, he had never profited from him. If possible, he really didn't want to provoke this kind of person. However, since the emperor had asked, he still had to answer truthfully. That's right. This person's ability to earn money is very strong. Regardless of whether it is in the immortal abode or in the realm beyond heaven, it is said that he is in existence who earns large sums of money every day. Even that unremarkable Yang Bao, I heard that he also earns quite a bit of money. This kind of person is a talent, and should be used by us. Zhu Qiyu longed for someone with the ability to help him. When he thought back to today's morning court, when all the officials had been so helpless, he thought that perhaps if Yang Qindong had been present, the situation wouldn't have been so awkward. Hearing that Zhu Qiyu wanted to put Yang Qindong in an important position, Jining lightly shook his head. Your Majesty, this subject said before that the Marquis of Loyalty and Courage is very capable of earning money. Thus, rather than calling him an official or a scholar, it would be better to call him a merchant. However, all merchants value profit over loyalty. No matter. It's good that he has a request. I'm afraid that a person has no desires. That way, we won't feel at ease using him. How about this, beloved official, immediately go see the Marquis of Loyalty and ask him about the matter of asking him to go to war. If he agrees, we will give him command of the army. Zhu Qiyu was truly decisive. He didn't doubt those he used and didn't use those he doubted. In this aspect, he was slightly better than Zhu Qizhen from Ingzong. At the very least, he wasn't so jealous. Since the emperor had given the order, Jining knew that it was useless to say anything else. He immediately nodded in agreement. This subject obeys. Soon after, just as Yang Qindong and Hu Yan returned to the Yang clan manor from the capital, Jining arrived. The current Jining was on the same level as Wang Zhen. His power was so great that few people could compare to him. His arrival naturally attracted Yang Qindong's personal welcome. Welcoming Jining was simply giving him face. As the saying went, if you're good, I'm good, everyone is good. Until he had enough soldiers to peacefully take over the great Ming dynasty, Yang Qindong didn't want to put on an aggressive front unless it was necessary. Yang Qindong and Jining were seated in the guest and host seats in a side hall. This had almost become a habit of Yang Qindong's. As long as it was a eunuch or a lowly person, no matter how much power they had, he would not receive them in the main hall. Those who could be received in the main hall were all people that Yang Qindong valued and admired. Jining naturally didn't know about this habit of Yang Qindong's. If he did, he would probably be burning with rage right now. Not only did he not know, but he also had a request to make. Upon seeing Yang Qindong, Jining became extremely courteous, maintaining a smile on his face. This one was too busy the last 2 days and was unable to attend the wedding of the Marquis of Loyalty and Courage. I am truly sorry. You're too kind. Eunuch Jin is accompanying His Majesty. How important is that? Marquis marrying a wife is just a small matter. Yang Qindong chuckled, appearing completely unconcerned. In truth, he hadn't even asked Jining for advice on his wedding day. There were times when Yang Qindong would accommodate others for the sake of the greater good. For example, on a wedding day like this, he truly didn't want to see someone who was neither male nor female appear in front of him. Even some of his colleagues in the brocade guard, who were true men, had come uninvited. The only ones who had truly been invited were the court officials. Jining clearly knew this, but he had purposely raised this question to express his dissatisfaction. He also wanted to use this as a pretext to suppress Yang Qindong and have him take control of the conversation. Unexpectedly, Yang Qindong didn't feel the slightest bit of guilt. He used the excuse that marrying a wife was a small matter to cover it up. He didn't even say the most basic polite words. This little test made Jining understand that the following negotiations wouldn't be too smooth. At the same time, he became more careful. The conversation changed from probing to straightforward. Marquis of Loyalty and Courage, you must already know about what happened at the morning court today. Someone has recommended you to lead the army against the Walla and raise the prestige of our country. Jining was expressing that he understood his situation. He had just made a trip to Minister Hu's residence and must have received news of such an important matter. Now, please state your position. Jining didn't have any intention of beating around the bush. When Yang Qindong heard this, he smiled. This was also good. He didn't have to probe too much and could save a lot of time. Alright, since Eunuch Jin's words are so straightforward, then Marquis will also state his position here. It's just a mere Walla army. To be honest, Marquis doesn't really care about them. I won't hide it from Eunuch Jin. Marquis has already contacted the overseas mercenary headquarters. The army they've sent to support our great Ming should be here soon. Chapter 175. What? You've already contacted them in advance? When Jining heard this news, her expression was one of extreme shock. Yes. As the ancients say, if one does not consider the future, one will have immediate worries. After witnessing the ferocity of the Walla cavalry outside the Tuma castle, this marquis already knew that it would be difficult for our great Ming Empire's army to be their opponent. Thus, he prepared for a rainy day and sent out a signal to send out reinforcements. What? Is Eunuch Jin blaming Marquis for acting on his own? There was a faint smile in Yang Qindong's eyes as he stared at Jining. It was as if he wanted to see through his inner thoughts. No, how could that be? For some reason, Jining felt a sense of pressure. He had only felt this kind of pressure not long after entering the palace, when he was serving Zhu Di. It's fine as long as you don't. In truth, it's nothing much. I presume that someone of Eunuch Jin's abilities already knows how much it costs to hire these foreign mercenaries with advanced firearms. It's naturally best if the imperial court can take out this money. Everything will be fine and the capital will have no more worries. But if there's some difficulty, Marquis can pay for it himself. But if that's the case, they probably won't participate in the operation against the Walla army. After all, it won't cost much to have them protect me and my property from leaving the capital. Marquis can still afford it. But if they go into battle, the cost is truly not something Marquis can afford. Yang Qindong, who had always been so proud of his wealth that he didn't know how to spend it, was now crying about how poor he was. Jining couldn't help but grimace at these words. This was a clear threat. If Daizong was unable to fork out enough money for the military expenditure, Yang Qindong would bring his men and leave the capital. Perhaps he would directly seek refuge with Zhu Qizhen, who was currently settling down in Nanjing. If this was the case, Jining didn't even dare to imagine what sort of chain reaction it would set off. He would not forget that it was precisely because of the opening of the immortal abode and heaven beyond heaven that the hearts of the people were at ease and many officials were willing to stay in the capital. Then, if he left now, would those officials who swayed according to the wind also leave with him? If the people wanted to leave, the officials would have to go with them, and the capital would truly be nothing more than an empty shell. At that time, before Wallace's army could even arrive, the capital would have already fallen into chaos. This duke knows about this matter. However, this matter is of great importance. This duke still needs to report back to the emperor to make a decision. Seeing Yang Qindong draw the line, Jining knew that the initiative had changed hands. Unless she didn't want to rely on this person's strength to help, she could only fulfill the conditions to protect herself. After Jining finished speaking, she stood up and looked like she was about to leave. Eunuch Jin, please wait. Marquis hasn't finished speaking yet. The emperor and the imperial court would provide the military necessities, and Marquis would only be a middleman, which would not benefit him in any way. As the saying goes, one should not get up early when one is powerless. Here is one of Marquis' personal conditions. Oh, it's all written on this paper. I'll have to trouble Eunuch Jin to bring it back for His Majesty to see. Marquis will be waiting here for your good news. Yang Qindong was beaming with joy and contentment. At this moment, Yang Qindong was beaming with joy as he handed a piece of white paper filled with words to Jining. He was openly asking the imperial court for benefits from the emperor. How could this be the conduct of a law-abiding official? Normally, Jining would have ridiculed him, and then a large group of embroidered uniform guards and Eastern Depot agents would surround this place and arrest him. But now, he had a favor to ask. Although he was angry, he could only forcefully suppress his dissatisfaction. He even forced a smile and said, "All right, I will report the loyal Marquis' intentions to the emperor. Don't worry." Jining reached out and took the paper full of words. Then, he strode away. He was really afraid of Yang Qindong. He was afraid that if he left at night, Yang Qindong would say something that would embarrass him. Seeing Jin Ying's back gradually disappear, Tiger's Mane, who had been standing guard beside Yang Qindong in the side hall, took half a step forward and said, "Young master, are we really going to help Daizong? Why don't we take advantage of this opportunity to watch him perish? That way, when we make a move at the last moment, won't we be able to reap the benefits?" Foolish. Yang Qindong, who had been smiling, suddenly had a cold expression. He looked at Tiger's Mane and said, "Have you forgotten what this young master said before? We're all Han people, so how can we protect the interests of the Han people and let them live better? That's what we need to do and consider. As for anything that harms the interests and lives of the common people, we must not do anything, understand?" Yang Qindong was suddenly angry, which gave Tiger's Mane a fright. He immediately half-knelt on the ground and said, "Young master, I was wrong. You are the director of the security bureau. When you have nothing to do, you should analyze the situation properly. In the future, there will be many uses for you. If your ability proves that you can't keep up, then it's time for us master and servant to part ways." Yang Qindong sighed softly and said with a tone of disappointment. When he heard that he had to leave Yang Qindong because of this, Tiger's Mane was really frightened. His expression was blank and he said in fear, "Young master, don't worry. Tiger's Mane will definitely study hard and won't make such a mistake again." While Yang Qindong was teaching Tiger's Mane a lesson, in the carriage, Jining had already opened the paper that Yang Qindong handed to her. When she saw the requirements written on it, she punched the window frame of the carriage and said angrily, "Loyal Marquis, you are really pushing your luck. Loyal Marquis, you are going too far." In the palace, after Zhu Qiyu saw the piece of paper sent by Jining, his expression changed unpredictably. In the end, he roared in anger. On the paper, Yang Qindong actually asked to open a bank of the Yang family, a business to deposit money. In other words, he wanted to build a private bank, a bank recognized by the great Ming dynasty. Money and soldiers had always been synonymous with ruling a country. Often, when you had these 2 points, it was equivalent to having the foundation to establish a new power or even a new country. Yang Qindong's request for Zhu Qizhen to agree to open a bank was equivalent to taking food from a lion's mouth. No wonder he was so angry. "No, I absolutely cannot agree to it. Zhu Qiyu threw the paper in her hand to the ground, looking angry. Jining bent down to pick it up and carefully came to Zhu Qiyu's side. Your Majesty, please calm down. For the sake of your health, don't be so angry. How can I not be angry? This Yang Qindong clearly wants to loot a burning house. Does he really think that without him, we won't be able to defeat the Walla? At worst, I will personally lead the army into battle. Zhu Qiyu was so angry that he was almost roaring. It was obvious how angry he was at this moment. When Zhu Qiyu mentioned leading the army into battle, Jining somehow thought of Wang Zhen's death in the chaos of the army. She couldn't help but shiver. She quickly advised, Your Majesty, you can't. The Walla is coming with ferocious momentum. Our army's morale and strength are lacking. This is not the right time to fight. Not the right time. Even if I can't defeat them, do you think that Yang Qindong can defeat them? Ah! Or do you think he is stronger than me? Zhu Qiyu was so angry that he lost his head. At this moment, he was so angry that he questioned Jining. Jin Ying's face was filled with fear and trepidation. She knelt on the ground with a thump. Your Majesty, you have a body of gold. You are the true dragon, the son of heaven. Naturally, there is no one more powerful than you in this world. However, that Yang Qindong didn't rely on himself. He hired mercenaries with new firearms with a large sum of money. Mercenaries? That's right. Since they can be hired with a large sum of money, why can't we? How about this, my beloved official, you think of a way to contact those mercenaries. We will also pay how much money Yang Qindong is willing to pay. I don't believe that they can't be used by us. Zhu Qiyu was ruthless. He decided to throw money at them and compete with their strength. After the great Ming dynasty was ruled by Ren Xuanji, there was a lot of money in the national treasury. If it was a competition of wealth, how could the newly developed Yang Qindong be a match for a country? Seeing that Zhu Qizhen's eyes were almost red from anger, Jining knew that she couldn't refuse this matter. He immediately agreed and then quickly left the palace. He was very suspicious that if he continued to stay, he was afraid that if he was displeased, he would be in big trouble. When faced with an enraged emperor, it was better to stay away from him. The embroidered uniform guards and the Eastern Depot were very efficient. They had long since begun investigating who the leader of the mercenaries was. In addition, Yang Qindong hadn't tried to hide anything. Since this force had already been exposed, they had no intention of withdrawing it. Sooner or later, they would have to announce it to the world. Since that was the case, they might as well do it openly. What harm was there in letting others know? After finding out that the leader of the mercenaries was called Xiao Feng, and that he was a citizen of the great Ming dynasty, Jining brought a few of her trusted subordinates to meet him in an unremarkable restaurant. Ever since the immortal abode appeared in the city, the business of the other restaurants had been greatly reduced. In the past, some of the tycoons rarely patronized the restaurant, and the restaurant was barely hanging on despite the death of its owner. The restaurant they met in was in such a miserable state. She asked to reserve the entire restaurant, and even threw down 10 taels of silver. The owner readily provided the location. By the time Xiao Feng appeared, Jining had already drunk 3 cups of tea. With his current power, there were very few people who could make him wait like this. A trace of impatience appeared on his face. It wasn't until Xiao Feng appeared with 2 of Ling Feng's subordinates that a trace of joy appeared on his face. Company Commander Xiao, I'm here. Xiao Feng, who was attracted by the shouts, only casually raised his head to take a glance. He then calmly walked towards the 2nd floor. His footsteps did not have the slightest intention of speeding up because of the other people waiting. All of this was seen by the few embroidered uniform guards who had followed him. Perhaps it was because they were used to being arrogant, but when they saw someone even more arrogant than them, they were naturally unhappy. Chapter 176. He's an esteemed guest. All of you, behave yourselves. Don't interrupt as you please. Sensing the changes in her subordinates' emotions, Jin Ying's expression turned cold, causing her subordinates to become much more obedient. Ha ha ha, Commander Xiao, it's an honor to meet you. After reminding her subordinates to behave, Jin Ying saw that Xiao Feng had already reached the second floor and was standing in front of her. She immediately laughed heartily. Xiao Feng noticed Jin Ying's enthusiasm, but he didn't show any reaction. Instead, he nodded and arrogantly sat down on a chair in front of the table. He crossed his legs and casually scanned the surroundings. This restaurant's decor is too old-fashioned. It's too old-fashioned. What he meant was that the place Jin Ying had chosen to meet him was a little too shabby. In response, Jin Ying could only smile and say, I originally wanted to invite Commander Xiao to a banquet in the Immortal Abode, but after considering that it's the Loyal Marquis territory, I'm afraid it'll be inconvenient. What's so inconvenient about it? We're mercenaries. We're only doing this because we took the Loyal Marquis money. Xiao Feng raised his head, as if he didn't care about Yang Qindong at all. It seemed like Xiao Feng didn't put anyone in his eyes, but when he said these words, his little heart was thumping. He thought in his heart, young master, you taught me to do all of this. It's not that I don't respect you. How could Jin Ying know this? After probing a little, she discovered that Xiao Feng and Yang Qindong were only mercenaries. She was overjoyed. As expected, mercenaries only recognized money and not people. In that case, if others could hire them, wouldn't it be the same if they had money too? As she rejoiced in this information, Jin Ying leaned forward and asked in a small voice, then if our emperor is willing to pay money to hire you, would you be willing to work for him? Why not? Xiao Feng stared at Jin Ying, as if this was a matter of course and there was no doubt about it. Jin Ying didn't expect to get the answer so quickly. She was overjoyed and sighed that this task wasn't difficult. She opened her mouth and said, if that's the case, how much did the Loyal Marquis spend to hire you? Our emperor is willing to pay the same price, no. I'll give you an extra 10%. Oh. Your emperor is willing to invite us. But what are you doing? Xiao Feng pretended to be interested and asked. It's nothing. We just hope that you can defeat the Walla's army that threatens the safety of the capital. Our emperor has also said that once you succeed, he will give you more silver. Jin Ying was afraid that Xiao Feng would be afraid of war, so she purposely emphasized on giving them more money. Tiger's Mane had previously spoken to Xiao Feng on behalf of Yang Qindong about what would happen if he met Jin Ying. He wasn't surprised at all that Jin Ying had said. Thus, when he heard this, he said as they had discussed, Eunuch Jin, I'm very sorry, but this isn't a problem with the money. Jin Ying, who had been prepared to talk incessantly and even wondered if she could get some more money from the commission for her own use, was immediately struck dumb by Xiao Feng's answer. She didn't understand. Just now, they had said that they could be hired with money, so why couldn't they do it now? Seeing the confusion on Jin Ying's large face, Xiao Feng shook his head and seriously said, Eunuch Jin presumably knows that I am only a company commander and belong to a branch of the mercenary army. There are officers above me, so I can only report your request to the higher-ups. As for whether they will accept or not, that will depend on the higher-ups. What? You mean that your position doesn't allow you to make the decision on this matter? Jin Ying had thought that Xiao Feng was the head of the mercenary army, but to her surprise, he didn't even have the authority to make the decision. That's right, I truly don't have the authority to make the decision. Of course, if your emperor is willing, you can report the price first. I will immediately report the situation. I think it won't take long before we get a reply. Xiao Feng nodded and said in a businesslike tone. Upon hearing that he still had to report the matter, Jin Ying considered the current situation in the capital and realized that he probably didn't have much time to prepare. Thus, he anxiously asked, then how long will it take for you to report the matter? That will depend on luck. If everything goes smoothly, it should be about a month or two. Xiao Feng pretended to be thinking very seriously, and after thinking for a while, he very cautiously replied. Yang Qindong had naturally thought of this answer so that Jining wouldn't have any other ideas. Reality proved that when Jining heard this answer, he immediately became listless. Only now did he realize that what Xiao Feng had said wasn't a problem with the money, but rather how to interpret it. This was Yang Qindong's method of giving people hope and then giving them disappointment. In order to prevent others from thinking that these mercenaries were directly related to him, he couldn't refuse Jin Ying's request, but he also couldn't fulfill his wish. In this way, the delaying technique could be put to good use. Jining left in disappointment, not even offering a price. He probably also knew that if he waited for Xiao Feng to report the matter, who knew how long he would have to wait. At that time, whether or not the capital even existed would be up in the air. Trying to change the situation would be pointless. Upon returning to the imperial palace, Jining truthfully reported his meeting with Xiao Feng to Zhu Qiyu. At this time, Zhu Qiyu had already awoken from his rage at Yang Qindong's request, or perhaps it could be said that he was no longer so angry. When he heard Jin Ying's report, he let out a long sigh and said, "So, we can only agree to the loyal marquis request?" "I'm afraid that's the only thing we can do," Jining weakly replied. The emperor trusted him so much, but if he couldn't even handle such a small matter, he truly felt that he had no face left. "Beloved official, what do you think of this matter? If I agree to the loyal marquis request and allow him to set up a private bank, what kind of adverse effect will it have on us?" Knowing that there was no other choice, Zhu Qiyu began to face the problem of the Yang clan's bank. Jining had already begun to consider this matter on the way back from the restaurant. Since the mercenary route was not feasible, they could only face Yang Qindong. The matter of the bank had to be placed before them. Hearing Zhu Qizhen's question, Jining hesitated for a moment, and then a vicious light flashed through his eyes as he said, "Your Majesty, this might not be a bad thing. You can agree to let him set up a Yang clan bank. As long as Walla retreats, won't your Majesty have the final say in your territory? What if the loyal marquis is not here one day? Don't you think that the money in the bank will be confiscated? If that's the case, everything the loyal marquis is doing now is just making a wedding dress for Zhen." "Beloved official, is this what you mean?" Zhu Qiyu originally had this idea, but he was the emperor. This kind of matter of getting rid of the donkey after it had outlived its usefulness was not good, so as to avoid other people's gossip. However, Jining was completely different. He was just a eunuch. For someone who wasn't complete, it was normal for him to do anything. "Your Majesty is wise." Jining saw that Zhu Qiyu understood what he meant and immediately knelt on the ground and exclaimed, "Ha, good, good." The problem was solved so easily. Zhu Qiyu couldn't help but be in a good mood. If that's the case, what's the harm in agreeing to his request? Not only that, we should also create momentum for him. How about this, when the Yang family bank is established, the imperial palace will also deposit some silver into it. Presumably, with this emperor taking the lead, there will definitely be many people depositing silver, and the amount won't be small, right? Yes, your Majesty is wise. When the Yang clan bank is set up, it will be a fat pig. Once it's fattened up, your Majesty can slaughter it at any time and use it for your own purposes. Jining also chuckled at the side. At this moment, the two officials had malicious smiles on their faces. If Yang Qindong saw this, he would definitely be overjoyed. In the Yang clan manner, Xiao Feng had already rushed back and reported the first sentence he said to Jining from the beginning to the end of their meeting. If Jining was present at this moment, she would definitely be very surprised. Company Commander Xiao Feng, who had said that he didn't care about the loyal marquis, was now so respectful and careful when he saw Yang Qindong. "You've done well. Go and have a good rest." Yang Qindong, who was very satisfied with Xiao Feng's performance, smiled and watched him leave. He knew that after this meeting, even if Zhu Qiyu didn't agree, he would have to agree. In this way, the Yang clan bank would be recognized by the imperial family, and its development would be just around the corner. Of course, with Yang Qindong's intelligence, it was impossible that he hadn't thought of Zhu Qiyu's revenge. However, killing him was undoubtedly a fool's dream. He would let the other party be happy for a while. When the Yang clan bank really became strong, it would be too late for regrets. Tiger's Mane, immediately send a message to Gao Xiong in Qiqian City. Have him transport all the gold stored in the city and plundered from the sea to the capital. I have great use for it. Yang Qindong gave the order after some thought. The matter of the Yang clan bank would soon be resolved. In comparison, this was a profitable business. With money, he would have a foundation for development. With money, he could do many things that he wanted to do. At that moment, he hummed a little tune as he walked towards the rear courtyard. There were 4 outstanding beauties waiting for him there, waiting for him to appear. Chapter 177. In the main hall of the Imperial Palace, the officials had gathered early in the morning for a meeting. There was only one topic for this so-called meeting: who should lead the army to battle Walla. In yesterday's imperial court, Vice Minister Su Yozhen of Taichung Temple had recommended that Marquis of Loyalty Yang Qindong lead the army. Zhu Qiyu had not agreed on the spot and had instead given the officials one day. Early this morning, this topic had become the first matter to be resolved. Last night, another report had come from the front lines. Commander and Commander-in-Chief Wuqing Count Shiheng had led a defeated army of less than 30,000 retreating toward Datong. There was nothing in front of Walla's army to block their path, and they were able to pass through Juyong Pass and head straight for the capital. This meant that the enemy would arrive at the capital in 7 days at the slowest and 4 at the fastest. If the capital was still unprepared, it would be broken through and everyone would be captured or killed. With the situation so grim, a candidate had to be chosen. Jining announced the news she had received last night in front of all the officials. There were those in the imperial court who were terrified, uneasy, and pale. Civil officials used their mouths while military officials used their sabers. In times of peace, etiquette came first and reason was paramount. This naturally created a situation in which civil officials suppressed military force. But in an emergency situation, reason naturally did not make sense. Trying to reason with the enemy was tantamount to telling a tiger in the mountains to switch to a vegetarian diet. How laughable was that? It was no different from walking into the tiger's den. When they saw that the war was unavoidable, the civil officials naturally shut their mouths. On the contrary, they even revealed expressions of fear. They were completely different people compared to how they were in the past, talking about the past and discussing the present. Who wouldn't be afraid of death? After repeated defeats, Walla's army had placed an enormous pressure on the officials. One could truly say that they paled at the mere mention of it. In this situation, now that there was a candidate to recommend, the officials naturally did not hold back on their praise. Minister of War Yi Ming proposed that Marquis of Loyalty Yang Qindong lead the army. This new minister was truly rather afraid that if there was no suitable candidate, Dai Zong would have him lead the army into battle. If that happened, what difference would it be from sending him to his death? With the Minister of War taking the lead, the other officials naturally agreed. At this moment, they were treating a dead horse as if it were still alive. And it wasn't just the officials. Even Hu Xiao and Hu Chengning, who had opposed the idea yesterday, were now among the officials who supported it. Not only did they support Yang Qindong leading the army, they also requested that he be given great authority. They also said that if the army could not be unified, countless variables could appear on the battlefield. Obviously, when they returned to the Hu estate yesterday, Yang Qindong's words could be considered to have convinced the Hu father and son, which was why they had such a change today. The crowd of courtiers almost unanimously supported Yang Qindong. Sitting high on the dragon throne, Zhu Qiyu knew that the general trend could not be changed. At the imperial court, he ordered people to go forward and pass on the imperial decree for Yang Qindong to attend the imperial court. At this moment, the newly ascended emperor had clearly made up his mind. In the Yang clan manner, Yang Qindong wore a black gauze hat and a turtleneck shirt. There was a python pattern on the chest patch and a belt around his waist. He looked like a third-rank official as he sat in the main hall. Beside him, Hu Yan, Qiao Yin, Lady Shui, Lady Xiang, and Yang Duo were pointing and laughing. From time to time, they would cover their mouths with their hands and chuckle. Clearly, this was the first time they had seen the sanctimonious Yang Qindong. Is there something wrong with that? Seeing that the 5 women's eyes were so curious and changing, Yang Qindong finally couldn't help but ask if there was a problem. No, it's very good. I used to see grandfather and father dressed like this when they went to court. I just didn't expect 6th Lang to have such a day, so I'm very curious. Hu Yan covered her mouth and chuckled while shaking her head. She wanted to pretend to be serious, but no matter how she looked at it, she could not hide the smile on her face. There was really nothing wrong with Yang Qindong's clothes. If there was anything to blame, it could only be blamed on his young age. He was not even 20 years old, yet he was dressed so formally. It gave the girls a feeling that he was too dignified and ridiculous. Is there really no problem? Yang Qindong asked with some disbelief. He glanced at the women one by one. Apparently, he did not believe Hu Yan's words just now. There's really no problem. Seeing the disbelief on Yang Qindong's face, 7th sister Yang Duo stood up. It's just because you rarely wear court attire, so everyone is not used to it. Yes, I'm also not used to it. Forget it, I won't wear it. Come, take it off for the young master. Yang Qindong also felt uncomfortable after wearing these clothes, so he simply decided to stay away from them. As he spoke, he really took off the court attire. Qiao Yin stepped forward to help and asked with doubt, 6th Lang, do you really want to take it off? Didn't you say that the emperor would send an edict to invite you to enter the palace in a while? There's nothing wrong with entering the palace, but who stipulated that I have to wear court attire to enter the palace? It's so awkward, so it's better not to wear it. Yang Qindong smiled and shook his head. In his heart, he was thinking, I don't have the intention to be an official of the great Ming dynasty, so why do I have to abide by their rules? Besides, if I can't even make this decision and have this little freedom, then I'll be too pitiful. After taking off the court attire and changing into a new set of green clothes, Yang Qindong felt incomparably comfortable. He couldn't help but laugh. That's right. Nothing is more important than being yourself. You should also remember, unless it's an important occasion, you can wear whatever you want. Wear whatever is comfortable. Life is only a few decades, so don't be too hard on yourself. Just as he changed into a new set of green clothes, a eunuch came to pass on a message from outside the Yang family manor, asking the loyal marquis to immediately enter the palace. The emperor and all the civil and military officials were waiting for him. Tiger's Mane had already prepared a healthy horse. Yang Qindong nimbly flipped onto the horse and waved at the women behind him. Then, under the protection of Tiger's Mane and Qiu Vi, the first guard, he went straight to the capital. Hu Yan watched her husband leave. When she couldn't see his shadow anymore, she put on the appearance of a big sister. She turned around to look at Qiao Yin and the other 2 girls and said, Lu Lang has left. According to his instructions last night, we must immediately take action. Second sister Qiao Yin will stay in the Yang family manor to take care of the overall situation. Third sister Lady Shui and fourth sister Lady Xiang will go to the capital. As long as there are cheap properties and fields, buy them and register them. We'll listen to big sister's instructions. Qiao Yin, Xiao Yuxue, and Dong Hanxiang hurriedly agreed. Yang Duo and her daughter were left behind. Seeing everyone start to get busy, their faces were filled with envy. At this time, her thoughts were also changing. In her eyes, women were no longer just women who knew how to take care of their husbands and children. They could actually do many things. In the imperial court, the officials had been standing here for a long time. Some of the more impatient officials even looked out of the hall more than once, as if they were waiting for something. Amidst the anticipation of the officials, a eunuch's typical drake-like voice rang out. The loyal marquis requests an audience. He's here, he's here. When the officials heard the shout, they hurriedly straightened their clothes and stood in place. Even Zhu Qiyu, who was sitting on the dragon throne, subconsciously straightened his dragon robe and looked outside the hall with bright eyes. Amidst everyone's anticipation, the azure-robed Yang Qindong strode into the throne room. The last time he came to the throne room, it was the second day after he entered the capital. He had beaten Wang Go and received the treatment of beating the drum. Compared to before, this time, he was less nervous and uneasy. The imperial court had long ago decreed that when entering the hall to meet the emperor, one had to wear the corresponding official robes. But at this time, Yang Qindong was dressed in azure-robed and entered the imperial court, yet no one said anything. Even the censors, who loved to nitpick, acted as if they did not see him. Subject Yang Qindong pays respects to your majesty. My majesty is. Yang Qindong entered the hall and knelt when he was 10 some steps away from the throne. After allowing Yang Qindong to kneel in front of him, Zhu Qiyu raised his hand and said, "All right, loyal marquis, stand up and speak." "Thank you, your majesty." Even though he did not like kneeling, in front of the officials, in the imperial court, there were some etiquette that could not be discarded. After answering, Yang Qindong slowly stood up. When he stood up, he stood there like a javelin, giving off the feeling that no matter what wind blew, he would not move. Standing among the officials was Hu Zhangning. He had been practicing martial arts since he was a child and had some skill. At this moment, when he saw Yang Qindong's performance, he could not help but have a thought in his mind. His son-in-law seemed to be a martial artist, and his strength should not be weak. But why did he not notice it before? Yang Qindong stood where he was. Zhu Qiyu, who did not understand martial arts, naturally could not see Yang Qindong's true strength. His intuition told him that the loyal marquis was standing there with great vigor. "Loyal marquis, we have summoned you to this hall to discuss matters. I presume that you also know what is going on. Walla's army is threatening the capital, and the officials have recommended you to lead the army. We also believe in loyal marquis, but are you willing to do your duty for the country?" Even though he had already sent Jining to privately discuss this matter with Yang Qindong, he still had to do his duty. At this moment, he still had to go through the proper procedures. This subject is willing to do his duty for the country, share His Majesty's burden, and do his best for the peace and prosperity of the Great Ming. Anyone could say beautiful words, and at this moment, Yang Qindong had put on a perfect display of the relationship between ruler and subject. Good. Zhu Qiyu was elated to see Yang Qindong so readily agree. "Loyal marquis, hear this. You are made general of swift cavalry, primary second rank, and left commander-in-chief of the 5 armies of the capital. You are in charge of the large and small armies of the capital, and you are in charge of all the soldiers in the city." Since he was going to be put in an important position, and at this critical moment, a promotion was only natural. As for controlling all the soldiers in the city, this was naturally because of the urgency of the situation, and he had no choice but to give Zhu Qiyu this important authority. Zhu Qiyu was keenly aware that this was a battle of life and death, so he naturally could not be careless. You're tuning into the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.